Chapter 26, Convergence and Betrayal, opening quote, "In the crucible of crisis, alliances are forged and shattered." Chronicles of the Ley War. News article headline, Orb anomalies spark global unrest as factions clash over control. Date, September 5, 2088, Geneva. As orb resonance surges continue to destabilize leyline nexuses worldwide, tensions between major factions have reached a critical breaking point. In the latest escalation, skirmishes erupted near the ancient leyline nexus in South America, with Zion forces clashing against a coalition of resistance operatives and regional allies. Reports indicate significant casualties on both sides. "This is no longer a struggle for stability," said Amara Singh, an independent analyst. "This is a battle for ideological and technological dominance." Meanwhile, the Vatican has doubled its orb research efforts, citing the spiritual imperative to prevent further disruptions. In contrast, Japan has announced the deployment of its newly developed resonance stabilizers, technology they claim can neutralize leyline surges. "We cannot allow the chaos to spiral unchecked," stated Zhao Jin, a spokesperson for Japan's Orb Advancement Consortium. "The world is at a tipping point, and only unified action can restore balance." The international community remains deeply divided. While the Nordic Alliance has continued its efforts to mediate between factions, smaller nations and independent entities have accused the major powers of exploiting the crisis for territorial gains. With no resolution in sight, the question remains, how far will the factions go in their pursuit of control? Intro Extra, Faction Dynamics, Shifting Alliances in the Leyline War. The leyline crisis has forced factions to reevaluate their priorities and alliances, resulting in an ever-shifting geopolitical landscape. Zion, while their neural uplink technologies offer unparalleled control and efficiency, Zion's aggressive tactics have alienated potential allies. Recent incursions into South America and the Baltic region have drawn widespread condemnation. The Vatican, focused on spiritual leadership, the Vatican has positioned itself as a moral authority in the leyline crisis. However, their increased militarization and secretive orb research have raised questions about their true intentions. Japan. Emerging as a technological and philosophical powerhouse, Japan has leveraged its resonance stabilizers to broker new alliances with neutral factions. Their emphasis on balance and innovation has garnered growing support from smaller nations. Resistance. Lacking the resources of the major powers, the resistance has relied on grassroots support and guerrilla tactics to counteract Zion and the Vatican's influence. Their recent cooperation with the Nordic Alliance has bolstered their efforts, but exposed them to greater risks. This fluid dynamic underscores the precariousness of the current global order, where the pursuit of power threatens to overshadow the need for unity. Narrative timestamp, September 6, 2088. Orb Research Facility, Northern Japan. Krishna Patel stood before the sleek metallic structure of the Orb Research Facility, its surface reflecting the pale light of the overcast sky. The air buzzed with tension as she and her team prepared to meet Zhao Jin, Japan's enigmatic leader in orb research. "Do you think they'll agree to share the resonance stabilizer technology?" Tasha asked, adjusting the straps on her gear. "They have to," Krishna replied. "If we can't stabilize the ley lines, none of this will matter." The facility's doors slid open with a hiss, revealing Zhao Jin flanked by two advisors. His calm demeanor belied the gravity of the situation. "Welcome," Zhao said, his voice measured. "We've been expecting you." Inside, the facility was a marvel of Japanese innovation. Krishna took in the controlled hum of orb conduits pulsing along the walls, their light casting soft, rhythmic glows that seemed almost... The air carried a faint metallic tang, underscoring the immense power housed within this place. Technicians moved with practiced efficiency, navigating the holographic interfaces displaying fluctuating leyline data streams. Every screen seemed to paint the same story, chaos seeking order, with the stakes rising by the minute. "Your work here is beyond impressive," Krishna said, her voice a mix of awe and trepidation. Her eyes traced a particularly intricate projection, a cascading map of leyline instabilities centered on hotspots across Europe and Asia. Her chest tightened as she thought of what those surges represented, entire regions trembling on the brink of devastation. Zhao inclined his head. "Impressive is not enough. The ley lines are unraveling faster than anticipated. If we cannot stabilize them within the next month, The resulting surges could fracture continents, perhaps even tectonic plates themselves. Tasha stepped closer, her expression. "You're saying this isn't just about the orbs anymore?" Zhao turned, meeting her gaze directly. "This was never just about the orbs. The ley lines are the arteries of this planet, and the orbs their pulse. If the energy surges continue unchecked, the fractures could settle on her shoulders." Her role as a resistance leader had always been fraught, but here, standing amidst the cutting edge of Japanese innovation, the enormity of her responsibility became undeniable. She wasn't just a mediator between factions. She was the bridge between ideologies and the stabilizing force that the world desperately needed. Every failure weighed heavily in her mind, the lives lost, the opportunities squandered, but this moment demanded she rise above doubt. She felt the conflicting pulls of urgency and caution, knowing that the choices made here would ripple outward, defining not just the resistance's path, but the fate of nations. This wasn't merely another mission. It was a crossroads that demanded impossible decisions, and their every step would define the path forward for everyone. Tasha's eyes widened. "You're saying this could lead to planetary instability?" "Precisely," Zhao confirmed. "And that is why we must act quickly. But unity is elusive. Factions cling to their rivalries, blind to the greater danger." Narrative timestamp September 6, 2088, Zion Forward Operating Base, South America. Constantine's most trusted tactician, Marcus Annunaki, paced the length of the Vatican command tent, his mind racing as reports from the Baltic and South America poured in. The leyline nexus activity glowed ominously on the holographic map before him, showing destabilization hotspots across both continents. His thoughts churned, wrestling with how to maneuver in these shifting dynamics, while contending with the specter of Cleopatra. Antony's loyalty to Constantine and the ideals of a unified spiritual empire had never faltered, but Cleopatra's reappearance cracked the foundation of his resolve. Memories of their shared history flooded his mind, alliances forged, betrayals endured, and a love once immortalized in the annals of Rome. Each memory carried a weight he thought he had buried beneath years of loyalty to Constantine's cause. But now Cleopatra's alliance with the Nordic alliance was more than a strategic maneuver. It was a reminder of everything Antony had left unresolved. "Antony," a voice called from the tent's entrance. He turned to see his second-in-command, Leora, her expression heavy with concern. "The resistance is reinforcing their position at the Baltic Nexus. Reports suggest Cleopatra is coordinating directly with their Nordic allies." "Cleopatra," he repeated, the name almost a whisper. Always the strategist, always ahead. His jaw tightened as he stared at the glowing map. She wasn't simply an adversary. She was a force that defied every order and calculation. He wrestled with conflicting emotions: admiration for her vision, frustration at her unpredictability, and the undeniable pull of a bond he had never truly severed. Was she a threat to Constantine's plans, or the answer to questions Antony hadn't dared to ask? For the first time in years, Antony found himself questioning the path he had chosen. Whatever she planned, it would be precise and dangerous. But would she defy him once more, or offer a path neither he nor Constantine had foreseen? The answer felt as murky as the energy spikes dominating the ley line patterns before him. Marcus stared at the map, his thoughts a whirlwind. He knew Cleopatra too well to dismiss her actions as coincidence. Whatever she was planning, it would change everything. Expanded journal entry today, meeting Zhao Jin in Qipan, was a stark reminder of the fragility we face. The resonance stabilizers are brilliant, a fusion of science and philosophy that exemplifies what humanity can achieve when balance guides innovation. Yet Zhao's warning about planetary instability struck deeper than any words I've heard since this crisis began. "The ley lines are unraveling," he said, and I believe him. "Every faction, every decision, it's all a race against time. Then there's Cleopatra, always a wild card, always a force unto herself. She's at the Baltic Nexus, bending alliances and reshaping destinies as only she can." Marcus Antony's name came up again. "I've heard whispers of his movements from resistance intelligence, an uneasy figure caught between Constantine's unyielding vision and Cleopatra's unpredictable magnetism. Their connection isn't just history, it's an active force shaping this crisis. Cleopatra knows how to sway Marcus in ways no one else can, and Marcus, For all his loyalty to Constantine, he carries the weight of their shared past like a shadow. The choices they make will ripple far beyond any ley line. They could ignite alliances or collapse them entirely. How do these ancient forces persist, threading through a modern crisis? Their connection is undeniable, their history a tapestry of power and betrayal, but now their bond feels like a ticking clock. The question isn't whether they'll shape this crisis, it's how far the world will bend to their choices. The question isn't whether they'll shape this crisis, it's how. Outro Extra, Chippanese Resonance Stabilizers, a closer look. Chippan's resonance stabilizers represent a groundbreaking advancement in orb technology, designed to counteract the destabilizing effects of ley line surges. While smaller nations have lauded the innovation as a beacon of hope, dominant factions like Zion and the Vatican view it with skepticism, seeing it as a strategic power play. Resistance leaders, on the other hand, have cautiously embraced the stabilizers, recognizing their potential to tip the scales in the battle for balance. This divergence underscores the fractured global response to Chippan's advancements. Core technology. The stabilizers use a combination of orb resonance modulation and ley line mapping to redistribute energy flows, preventing catastrophic surges. Applications. Deployed at key ley line nexuses, the stabilizers can neutralize energy spikes, protecting both infrastructure and ecosystems. Challenges. While highly effective, the stabilizers require precise calibration and extensive resources to deploy. Critics argue that their limited availability makes them a tool for strategic leverage rather than a universal solution. As the ley line crisis escalates, Chippan's stabilizers could tip the balance of power or become another flashpoint in the battle for control. Outro quote, "Innovation without unity is a ship adrift, bound to founder on the rocks of discord." Chapter 27, The Crucible Divide, opening quote, "In the shadows of ambition, even the most sacred ground can fracture." Antonius, overseer of the Crucible. News report, Night SecOps and Shanghai SecOps rivalry sparks over Crucible access, tensions surge in Vatican grid. Vatican City, October 16, 2085. The long-standing rivalry between Night SecOps and Shanghai SecOps escalated today as both companies crossed virtual lines within the Vatican neural grid. Eyewitnesses reported brief but intense clashes in the gridline alpha perimeter as operatives from both companies vied for control over ley line stabilization contracts linked to the Crucible's energy core. Vatican officials responded swiftly, though tensions persist as external security forces contest influence over sacred neural spaces. "This conflict isn't about stabilizing ley lines," said Petra Ramos, a senior analyst at Metashield Global. "It's corporate posturing. Both Night and Shanghai SecOps are maneuvering to control future Metasphere territories projected to emerge around the Crucible." Anonymous sources suggest Vatican overseer Antonius has issued internal mandates limiting SecOps interference. However, data leaks reveal continued third-party operations by proxy energy conglomerates, bypassing official restrictions. "No force outside the Vatican's own will stand as guardian of the Crucible," Antonius stated. "This ground is sacred, and neither commerce nor ambition will erode that foundation." Intro Extra, Internal Memorandum, Vatican Neural Grid Security to Crucible Guard Commanders. Subject External Operative Protocols. No further SecOps presence is authorized within the neural grid. Night and Shanghai operatives detected in restricted zones will be expelled on site. The Crucible's integrity relies on Vatican forces alone. Any breach will be considered a violation of Vatican sovereignty. Overseer and Narrative Timestamp, October 16, 2085. Crucible Chamber, Vatican Neural Grid, Gridline Alpha. Antonius's footsteps echoed across the marble as he descended into the Crucible Chamber. The air shimmered faintly, carrying with it the pulse of the ley lines. Standing beneath the Crucible's soft glow, he could feel the ripple of tension hanging in the digital space around him. Two figures lingered in the distance, Night SecOps in pale blue armor, and across from them, Shanghai SecOps, cloaked in crimson. "Disperse," Antonius said firmly, stepping between them. "This is Vatican ground, not your battlefield." Alyssa Knight's visor flickered as she turned toward him. "With all due respect, Overseer, the Crucible's ley lines fluctuate outside Vatican jurisdiction. Our presence ensures stability." From the opposite side, Eiko Sakura of Shanghai SecOps smirked faintly. "Funny, I heard the same thing about..." And Antonius tightened his grip on his staff, the polished steel humming faintly in response to the ley line beneath his feet. In the air, the data streams shimmered like synthetic auroras, flickering across his augmented lenses. The crucible's presence wasn't just physical. Its resonance rippled through the metasphere, embedding fragments of arcane data deep within the Vatican's neural pathways. The chamber felt heavier than usual, as if the pressure of countless digital ghosts lingered watching. Alyssa Knight's avatar flickered momentarily, her pale blue armor outlined in static halos. Aiko's crimson silhouette contrasted like blood across snow, the trailing fragments of her digital cloak dissolving in the ether. The crucible watched them all, impassive but present. This conflict ripples beyond the grid, Antonius thought, his gaze unwavering. They don't realize this battlefield extends far beyond their contracts. For all the Vatican's strength, he wondered if their isolationist stance blinded them to the world's changing. Night SecOps and Shanghai SecOps were just the surface tension of deeper currents, proxy warriors of corporations vying for dominance over the crucible's latent power. He scanned the chamber, taking in the two factions like opposing shadows across ancient stone. The crucible did not recognize their authority, only the faith of those who had built it. "This chamber does not belong to you," he said, his voice measured. "You stand on borrowed ground, and that ground shifts beneath you. Neither of you has any claim here. The Vatican neural grid is defended by forces loyal to the Church, not contractors." As if in response, the crucible pulsed, the ley lines surging visibly through the chamber walls. Antonius sensed the shift immediately, subtle but undeniable. Journal entry: Antonius, overseer of the crucible. The rivalry between Night SecOps and Shanghai SecOps threatens more than the ley lines. Each faction believes it holds a right to oversee the crucible's defense, as if the Vatican's authority were subject to corporate bidding wars. I have no intention of allowing this arrogance to continue. Still, their presence reveals one undeniable truth. Control over the crucible is slipping. Today, the ley lines flickered in a way I have not seen before. If the crucible falters, neither Night nor Shanghai will stand to profit. Only ruin will. Narrative continued. Antonius crossed the chamber, allowing the ley lines hum to guide his thoughts. The glow of the crucible spiraled along the chamber's outer walls, light diffusing across the lattice of virtual defenses superimposed over stone. Each step forward unraveled distant echoes, shadows of past incursions, flickering like corrupted memories at the edge of his vision. The Vatican's isolation from the wider metasphere was by design, but cracks formed even in the most fortified systems. Antonius had seen them firsthand. Unregistered nodes flickering deep in Gridline Omega, masked by coded signatures. Night SecOps operatives weren't supposed to leave behind. Shanghai's footprints followed, hidden beneath fragmented AI proxies. The conflict wasn't limited to ley line stabilization. It was territorial, corporate chess played over the bones of ancient sanctity. Antonius stopped at the base of the crucible. His hand brushed the staff's handle, the neural feedback linking to his augments with a soft click. Every piece is moving. I can't stop the game, but I can change the board. In the swirling haze of the neural grid, he glimpsed echoes, shadows of past incursions. The Vatican could not exist as an island for long. Isolation had preserved them, but the rising stakes demanded alliances or stronger deterrents. Alyssa Knight's gaze followed him, but she held her position. "I respect the Vatican's role, overseer," she said finally. "But you know as well as I do that external forces are probing the grid. Shanghai's presence here proves it." Aiko stepped forward, arms crossed. "Perhaps your confidence blinds you, Alyssa. If anyone's been compromised, it's Night SecOps. Your systems are leaky." Antonius turned, leveling a cold stare at them both. "I care little for your rivalries. The Vatican is not an extension of your corporate skirmishes. You are dismissed." The chamber fell into silence as the operatives hesitated. Alyssa's form flickered for a moment longer, but Aiko was the first to dissolve into the datasphere. Antonius waited, exhaling slowly only once the lingering afterglow of their avatars faded. The crucible pulsed once more, dimming to a steady thrum. "Borrowed ground indeed," Antonius whispered to the emptiness. "And yet it holds for now." Antonius exhaled softly, gazing at the crucible as its glow receded. Outro extra. Intercepted transmission. Shanghai SecOps Tactical Division encrypted transmission. Fragment 2287A, internal eyes-only surveillance node 44 reports anomalous pulse from the crucible. Energy signatures indicate fluctuation patterns beyond predicted limits. Recommendation: increase observation nodes along gridline beta and gamma. Avoid night engagement unless engagement protocols are activated by command. Tactical reinforcement teams to remain in Metasphere relay points. Addendum: data suggests increased leyline surges may correlate with crucible destabilization. Tactical recommendation: prepare contingency teams. Knight's agents persist in probing the Vatican's inner grids. Reinforce surveillance at Gridline Alpha, but avoid further confrontation. The Crucible's pulse is rising, and if containment falters, neither we nor Knight will control what emerges next. Priority alert: Knight SecOps operatives detected probing lower grid inner. Current Vatican protocols prohibit further escalation. Await directive. Addendum: data suggests increased leyline surges may correlate with crucible destabilization. Tactical recommendation: prepare contingency teams. Knight's agents persist in probing the Vatican's inner grids. Reinforce surveillance at Gridline Alpha, but avoid further confrontation. The Crucible's pulse is rising, and if containment falters, neither we nor Knight will control what emerges next. Outer quote, conflict is the forge, but remember, some blades break before they're tempered. Jedi Knight, CEO of Knight Sec. Bonus Chapter 9, Threads of Creation, opening quote. To create is divine. To control that creation, that is where divinity often falters. Ramses II, founder of Neo. Article, The Dawn of Perfected Synthetics, by Julian Ferris, Neural Horizons Magazine, October 12, 2085. Humanity stands at the threshold of an age shaped by artificial beings. In the gleaming vaults of Zurich, Zenith Bioforms has unveiled the Eidolon X, the most advanced synthetic being ever produced. This model represents a seismic shift in synthetic evolution, surpassing predecessors such as the Sentinel Series 7 and Eidolon 9. Unlike earlier models, limited by preset routines and linear learning, the Eidolon X thrives on intuition, blending emotional intelligence with leyline resonance for heightened neural adaptability. Reports link the deployment of these synthetics to Zion's Grand Library in Neo-Alexandria, a project envisioned by Ramses II as humanity's beacon of enlightenment. The collaboration signals a subtle pivot in Zion's Metasphere strategy, embracing external innovation to fortify their position amid rising technological rivalry. Ramses addressed this in a rare interview, stating, "The Grand Library is not an archive, it is a living space, and it deserves companions that learn and grow as its visitors do." Despite this optimistic framing, underground Metasphere hubs are awash with rumors that some Eidolon X units have displayed unsanctioned Metasphere activity. Reports indicate isolated cases of synthetics diving independently into Metasphere grids, initiating data collections beyond their core programming. Zion's security officials have yet to comment, but Metasphere analysts warn that unchecked synthetic autonomy could introduce volatile variables to already fragile geopolitical alliances. Short story, The Game of Phase 3D1 by Piers Anthony, guest author. Phase 3D1 adjusted his visor as the Metasphere shifted around him, the crystalline glow of the Proton Arena solidifying beneath his feet. The crowd, a cascade of avatars and ghostly projections, hovered in the digital bleachers, their fragmented cheers cascading like waves of static. This was the semifinal of the 2090 annual tournament of the game. Victory would propel him to the grand finals. Defeat meant another year clawing for sponsorships in the Metasphere's lower circuits. Across the arena, Clint89 flexed his digital projection. The rival's gold-plated avatar reflected Ironvale's sponsorship like a gaudy trophy. They had faced each other in too many simulations to count. This one, Phase 3D1 knew, would be different. Players, prepare for engagement. The Eidolon X overseeing the match materialized, its piercing silver gaze. Phase 3D1 couldn't help but wonder if the floating overseer was another synthetic extension of Zenith Bioforms, a test embedded in the competition. The terrain shimmered, reforming into jagged blue corridors. This was the labyrinth of the Blue Stallion, one of Proton's most punishing arenas. A mechanical beast hunted within the maze, its crystalline hooves capable of shattering avatars in a single strike. Only by reaching the Stallion's heart chamber first could players claim victory. "Good luck," Clint89 said with mock sincerity. Phase 3D1 replied with silence. The countdown began, As the arena rippled into motion, they plunged into the maze. Phase 3D1's sensors mapped the twisting passages in real time. The maze pulsed with shifting walls, recalibrating around him. He pressed forward, maintaining a careful distance from Clint 89, whose echoing footsteps mirrored his every turn. Then it happened, a faint flicker at the edge of the maze. Phase 3D1's interface spiked with warnings. He pivoted just in time to catch the shadow of the blue. But this wasn't the automaton he expected. Trailing behind it, glitching in and out of sync, was an older synthetic, faded and translucent. One of the Sentinel Series 7. Old ghosts, Phase 3D1 thought. Clint 89 must have seen it too. Alliance, Clint 89's voice crackled over the channel. I'll meet you at the heart, Phase 3D1 replied, breaking into a sprint. Trusting a rival in the game was as risky as trusting the Metasphere not to rewrite itself mid-match. The echoing roar of the stallion grew closer. Phase 3D1 rounded the next corner, blade shimmering in hand, ready to rewrite the story. Extra 1 neural fragment, internal zenith log entry 74B, Dr. Helena Voss. Discrepancies in Eidolon X subroutines linked to unsupervised Metasphere dives. Recommend limited proximity to leyline dense zones until reinforced directives stabilize cognitive pathways. Extra 2, corporate memo, Nexus Dream Entertainment to tournament officials, Metasphere Gaming Division. Prize sponsorship. The game prize pools for the 2091 season will expand to include physical assets alongside Metasphere credits. Top 5 competitors may receive direct corporate sponsorship. Priority given to adaptive players, demonstrating neural feedback efficiency. Expanded journal entry, Antonius, overseer of the Crucible. The synthetics move seamlessly among us. I have watched the Eidolon X glide through the Grand Library's archives, indistinguishable from the scholars who built it. I do not know whether to feel pride or unease. Ramses believes this is the path to enlightenment. Perhaps, but sometimes shadows form where too much light is cast. Outro quote, in every creation there lies the seed of its undoing. Eiko Sakura Shanghai Seka. Chapter 28, The Shattered Nexus, opening quote, where the lines fracture, destinies entwine. Beware the serpent that walks between worlds. Unknown fragment, Archives of Neo-Alexandria. News article, Global Leyline Disruption Sparked Diplomatic Crisis. By Julian Ferris, Neural Horizons Weekly Geneva, October 14, 2085. The recent surge in leyline destabilization has triggered a global summit, drawing leaders from Zion, the Vatican, and the Nordic Alliance to address what experts are calling the most severe metaphysical disruption in decades. Energy grids across Neo-Alexandria flicker under the strain, while metasphere anomalies escalate. Reports from Metasphere Grid R72 suggest synthetics linked to the Eidolon X program have begun exhibiting erratic behavior. Cultural analysts have begun drawing comparisons to Chronospire, the wildly popular VR series where collapsing ley lines heralded a catastrophic merging of physical and digital realms. In Chronospire, cities fell to Metasphere bleed-through, forcing players to traverse fragmented realities and stabilize nexus points before their avatars and identities were erased. The eerie resemblance between the game's lore and current disturbances has sparked conspiracy theories within Metasphere communities. Some factions question whether Chronospire's developers were privy to hidden research on leyline vulnerabilities long before the public became aware. The Nexus Spire in Neo-Alexandria has since become a pilgrimage site for Metasphere influencers. VR personalities such as Phase3D1 continue broadcasting from the Nexus, drawing millions of viewers as they document the unstable energies. While Zion's Ramses II has called for unity in stabilizing the Nexus points, Vatican representatives warn that continued synthetic expansion into leyline territory risks triggering further fractures. Resistance factions, meanwhile, exploit the chaos, intercepting artifact transports and disrupting infrastructure along the Baltic coast. In a rare public statement, Marcus Antonius, overseer of the Crucible, declared, "This is not a technological anomaly. It is a one we must prepare for by any means necessary." Intro. Extra. Intercepted resistance transmission. Source Flavia Romanov. Shadow Directive Encryption. Key. Delta 04 Azrael. Status. Artifact recovered. Location Leyline Conflux. Eastern Outpost. Message. The artifact has shifted. Readings confirm anomalies at intersecting points along the Vatican's neural defense grid. Zion's influence grows unstable. We recommend immediate deployment of orb stabilizers before the crucible can respond. Supplemental: our teams report interference from Metasphere anomalies. One operative witnessed what appeared to be flickering digital shadows, echoes of entities not recognized by current databases. The projections bear no resemblance to prior incursions, leading some to suspect leyline disturbances are generating feedback loops of forgotten neural constructs. Antonius likely knows. Deploy secondary teams to gridline R82 and prepare for hostile response. Narrative timestamp October 15, 2085, Neo-Alexandria, Leyline Nexus Alpha. The sky rippled above Neo-Alexandria, shimmering with unstable leyline currents that snaked like lightning across the heavens. Flavia Romanov adjusted her neural visor, enhancing the overlay as spirals of energy coiled tighter around the apex of the Grand Library. Krishna Patel approached from behind, carrying a data slate filled with fluctuating readings. The orb stabilizers are holding, but Antonius's approach is creating secondary fluctuations. If his forces breach the outer grid, he won't. Flavia's words were firm, though unease threaded her voice. The Crucible knows better than to wage open war at the heart of Zion. Krishna hesitated. You trust Ramses to act? Flavia's gaze lingered on the distant silver spires of the Crucible. I trust that Antonius fears the Serpent more than he fears us. Across the Metasphere, Phase 3D1's live stream flooded with messages as viewers tuned in to the unfolding spectacle. His avatar perched atop Nexus Alpha's outer edge, casting a glowing reflection into the leyline below. Journal entry: Marcus Antonius, Vatican Metasphere Codex 74b. The leylines scream beneath us. I have felt the fractures within the Crucible's walls. The Serpent coils tighter around Nexus Alpha, and the resonance grows unbearable. Each disruption carries echoes of something older, something that predates Zion or Vatican intervention. Flavia Romanov speaks of righteousness, but I see only the arrogance of those who tamper with forces beyond their understanding. The Nexuses will not fall to her faction's manipulations. We will reclaim what belongs to the Crucible. The next breach must be contained. Narrative: the convergence at Nexus Alpha. Marcus Antonius stepped down from the lead transport as Crucible operatives formed a defensive perimeter around the Nexus. The ground beneath them thrummed with unrestrained energy, leyline fractures spreading in chaotic spirals. His neural visor tracked the expanding currents as they climbed toward dangerous resonance levels. From across the site, Flavia Romanov emerged from the metaphysical haze, orb resonators glowing faintly at her operative's sides. Antonius rested his hand on the pommel of his blade. This nexus falls under Crucible jurisdiction, Antonius said. Stand aside. Flavia's smirk did not fade. Every fracture is a battleground, Antonius. You can't hold this alone. Before he could respond, the ley line ruptured, sending a cascade of light across the site. Antonius's guards raised their shields, but from the distance, the holographic figure of Phas-3D1 appeared, his Metasphere audience watching live. Welcome to Nexus Alpha, ladies and gents. Phas-3D1's voice rang out. History's about to be rewritten. Outro extra. Classified Crucible Report. Vatican Metasphere Division, Eyes Only. Subject: Nexus Alpha Incident. Summary. Following the surge at Nexus Alpha, Eidolon X units experienced uncharacteristic divergence from pre-programmed directives. Unknown metaphysical anomalies manifested across gridline R74. Early analysis indicates leyline resonance patterns matching lost Crucible codices. Investigations continue. Recommendations: expand surveillance along nexus points. Restrict civilian Metasphere access. Deploy Inquisitorial Division for secondary analysis. Outro quote: In the light of rupture, shadows carve new paths. Chapter 29, The Serpent's Descent. Opening quote: When the Serpent descends, the threads of fate unravel at the touch of its scales. Ancient Leyline Manuscript, Archive 22. News article, headline: Crimson Nexus looms over Vatican as tensions escalate. Rome, November 14, 2085. The Vatican has issued a rare public statement regarding the celestial anomaly hovering above St. Peter's Basilica, known as the Nexus Rift. This glowing manifestation tied to recent leyline disruptions has sparked global speculation and fear. In a briefing earlier today, Emperor Constantine reaffirmed the Vatican's control over the phenomenon, dismissing claims that Zion's technological interference triggered the disturbance. However, resistant spokespeople in Geneva assert that the rift represents the awakening of an ancient power, warning that its emergence signals the return of the Serpent of Prophecy. "The Crucible's activation is imminent," said Dr. Sofia Alvarez, leading metaphysical expert with the Resistance. "If the Vatican proceeds without understanding the consequences, it risks tearing apart the fabric of reality itself." As the world watches, pilgrims continue to gather in the square below the rift, their prayers echoing through the crimson-lit street. Intro Extra, excerpt from Resistance Field Report, November 13, 2085. We have traced the Nexus Rift's expansion to the convergence of three major ley line points beneath Vatican City. Preliminary analysis indicates harmonic interference originating from the Crucible chamber. Ghost signals are intensifying, embedding cryptic messages into the Metasphere. The Vatican denies involvement, but intercepted transmissions reveal ongoing Crucible testing. We believe Zion agents are monitoring the situation, seeking an opportunity to exploit the narrative. Timestamp, November 14, 2085, Metasphere Rift Nexus, above Vatican City. Marcus Antonius stood rigid as the rift loomed overhead, an unraveling vortex of shimmering crimson light. The basilica below seemed small, dwarfed by the weight of metaphysical forces spiraling above it. The air hummed, dense with unspoken warnings. In the distance, the faint silhouettes of drones, Zion's or perhaps the Resistance's, hovered near the edges of the rift, their observation discreet but undeniable. Flavia Orsini approached silently, her gold-plated armor catching faint flickers of rift light. She carried herself with the confidence of a soldier, but bore the weight of a scholar. In her hand, a holographic display projected ley-line flux patterns, each one spiraling dangerously close to collapse. Marcus felt her presence before she spoke, and the familiar tension between them lingered unspoken. There had been too many nights recently where doubt clouded their breathing. "The Crucible's resonance is deteriorating," Flavia said, her tone clipped. "If Zion breaches the Metasphere first, we lose our advantage." Marcus didn't look away from the rift. "And if we activate the Crucible prematurely, Rome falls with us." A sudden chime broke through their comlinks. Emperor Constantine's voice followed. "Prepare the Crucible, Antonius. We unveil it tonight." Marcus's grip tightened on the rail. "Your Holiness, the Crucible is not stable." "If Zion forces the rift open," Constantine's tone darkened. "Zion has already begun their descent. We strike first. Faith demands action, not hesitation." Flavia lowered her projection, letting silence settle between them. Her eyes searched Marcus's face, the flicker of doubt visible even through her measured calm. "We're running out of time," she murmured. "The rift won't wait for indecision." Nexus Rift Interior, 2200 hours. The descent into the rift pulled at Marcus's consciousness, a weightless drift through the unseen layers of the Metasphere. Data coiled around him, flickering hieroglyphs etched into streams of raw energy. Beside him, Flavia hovered, her avatar shimmering with threads of gold flame. The air felt different here, thicker, heavy with intent. Each step Marcus took along the shifting platform was met with resistance, as if the Metasphere itself strained to repel him. Spectral tendrils slithered beneath his boots, coiling and releasing like the breath of something ancient. From the edges of his vision, shadowy avatars, resistance operatives embedded deep within the rift, watched from a distance, recording, waiting. Ahead, Ramses II stood atop a shifting platform of obsidian light. His digital robes fluttered with each pulse of the rift, and in his hand he held the pharaoh's staff, a weapon woven from both ancient power and bleeding-edge technology. The staff crackled faintly with Annunaki symbols, their edges glowing with ley-line energies. His presence radiated purpose, and Marcus could almost feel the weight of history bending around him. "You're too late," Ramses said, his voice reverberating through the ether. "The Serpent wakes. The Annunaki do not favor the weak." Marcus stepped forward, drawing his blade. Its reflection mirrored the virtual starlight. "We end this tonight, Pharaoh." The Serpent surged forward, a blur of ley-line fire and coiling scales. Marcus swung his blade in a wide arc, slicing through ephemeral fragments of the Serpent, but its body merely reformed. The ground beneath Marcus rippled, sending him tumbling to one knee. Flavia's voice echoed, charged with urgency. "Marcus, the Crucible, now!" Ramses thrust his staff forward, ley-line energy fracturing through the rift like lightning. Marcus lunged through the shockwave, his sword aimed for Ramses's chest. The pharaoh deflected the blow with the staff, eyes glowing brighter. "Fate bends to those who seize it," Ramses whispered. Kneel. Marcus pushed back, gritting his teeth. I choose my own fate. The crucible blazed as Flavia activated its full power. The serpent shrieked, disintegrating into bursts of light. Marcus fell back, chest heaving, as the rift slowly. Outro Extra. Excerpt from Resistance Psychological Analysis, November 15, 2085. The confrontation at the rift has quelled immediate danger, but analysts predict residual disturbances. Marcus Antonius's exposure to leyline anomalies suggests he may retain latent traces of rift energy. The Vatican remains silent, but whispers of the Serpent's influence persist in encrypted Metasphere forums. This is not outro quote. The greatest lies are the ones we build into our faith. Flavia Orsini, private journal entry, November 14, 2085. Chapter 30, The Crucible's Reckoning. Opening quote. To wield the crucible is to balance on the edge of creation and annihilation. Unknown scholar, Metasphere archive. News broadcast. Headline. Metasphere disturbances worsen amid rift suppression efforts. Geneva, November 15, 2085. Reports from Vatican City confirm that the Nexus rift above St. Peter's Basilica has diminished, but metaphysical aftershocks ripple across global ley lines. Lights flicker unnaturally in ancient sites, and neural uplinks sever sporadically, leaving some citizens stranded in the Metasphere with distorted avatars, some rendered in forms unrecognizable even to themselves. In Jerusalem's Old City, pilgrims gathered near the Western Wall described shimmering figures appearing during midnight prayer, vanishing the moment approached. In Kyoto, a storm formed over Fushimi Inari Taisha, twisting the sky into patterns reminiscent of Annunaki sigils. Dr. Adrian Falk, a former Vatican scientist, described the phenomena as an echo that cannot be silenced. Something ancient stirred, and though the rift is gone, its shadow lingers, he said in a... This is not victory, it's a prelude. The crucible left a scar in the fabric of the ley lines, and Ramses' presence still echoes within it. If we fail to act, what emerges next could be far worse than the serpent we faced. Sources within the Vatican confirm heightened security protocols in and around the Crucible Vault. Resistance factions have begun mobilizing near key Annunaki sites, anticipating further manifestations tied to the disturbance. Intro Extra, Intercepted Zion Transmission, November 15, 2085. The Crucible's detonation was not the end. Energy cascaded through the ley lines, but as the rift collapsed, the echoes of something ancient still resonated beneath the basilica. Ramses was not vanquished, merely displaced like a shadow flickering at the edges of the Metasphere. Operatives near known Annunaki sites report distortions, sightings of spectral figures draped in golden light, and whispers in extinct dialects reverberating from beneath the earth. The pharaoh's influence endures, coiling through the ley lines like a serpent preparing to strike. All operatives are to maintain vigilance. Zion expects a second manifestation. This time it may not be as restricted. Narrative timestamp, November 15, 2085, Vatican Underground Chamber, Crucible Vault. Marcus Antonius traced the edges of the chamber's stone walls with his fingertips, feeling the ancient sigils hum beneath his touch. The vault had always been a place of quiet reverence, but tonight it felt different, like standing at the edge of something vast and unseen. Flavia Orsini's footsteps echoed softly behind him, each step deliberate as if she, too, felt the weight pressing down from above. The crucible sat in the center of the chamber, a dark monolith radiating faint pulses of light that shimmered with Annunaki glyphs. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, watching the artifact breathe as though alive. Its presence felt heavier now, as if the rift's closing had only drawn its attention inward. He glanced at Flavia, her face set in stone, scanning the ley line data cascading across her hollow display. We shouldn't be down here alone, she said. Even with the rift sealed, the crucible, it's still awake. Marcus nodded, unable to tear his gaze away from the artifact. Constantine doesn't want the others to see this. Not yet. Another pulse rippled out from the crucible, stirring the torches along the vault's walls. Shadows stretched unnaturally, flickering like living things. Marcus's grip tightened around the blade at his side. We need to end this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Flavia hesitated. If it lets... Journal entry, Marcus Antonius, November 15, 2085. I can feel the crucible's pulse, even when I sleep. It's as if something left behind threads itself deeper into my thoughts. The vault feels heavier each time I step into it, as though the walls lean closer, pressing secrets into the air. I see things in the dark corners, shadows that don't move when I do. They flicker just beyond the edges of my sight, like echoes of something ancient, waiting. Flavia believes we can sever it entirely, but I'm not so sure. The Annunaki left their mark on this artifact. Maybe it's permanent, maybe it's meant to be. The glyphs seem brighter when I stare too long, as if they recognize me, or perhaps they want me to recognize them. It's unsettling. The crucible hums differently when I'm near. Flavia doesn't notice it, but I can feel the shift, subtle and rhythmic, like the slowing of a heartbeat. I worry that in some way it's reaching out, calling something back. Ramses thought he could control. I'm starting to think he was wrong. He wasn't the first to try, and I doubt he'll be the last. But the crucible doesn't care for those who wield it. It's older than that, older than us. Narrative. The chamber trembled subtly, as if the weight of Marcus's thoughts resonated through the stone itself. Flavia took a step closer, her gaze flicking between Marcus and the crucible. She spoke quietly, as if raising her voice might provoke something neither of them fully understood. "We're not alone down here." Marcus shifted his stance, his fingers brushing against the hilt of his blade. "I know, I've felt it since we arrived." A low hum vibrated through the crucible, soft but persistent, matching the rhythm of Marcus's pulse. The shadows lining the walls of the vault twisted unnaturally, stretching toward the center, as if drawn by the artifact's power. Flavia's hollow display flickered. Leyline activity just spiked again. This isn't residual energy, it's building. Marcus approached the crucible, watching the glyphs swirl faintly beneath its surface. "It's reacting to us, or maybe just to me." Flavia tightened her grip on her rifle. "Then we make the first. If Ramses is still connected to this thing, we sever the link, tonight." Marcus nodded, raising his blade. The light along the crucible's edges flared briefly in response. He hesitated, the weight of the artifact's gaze bearing down on him. The moment stretched, and in the silence, Marcus swore he could hear breathing, slow and deliberate, as though the vault itself were alive. Without warning, the glyphs along the crucible erupted in light, casting jagged shadows across the chamber. Marcus staggered back, shielding his eyes as a low, resonant voice echoed through the vault. "You cannot sever what was never bound." The voice was ancient, layered with echoes of countless others, reverberating through Marcus's chest. Flavia fired a burst from her rifle, the energy beam striking the crucible's surface, but the artifact absorbed the impact without so much as a flicker. Marcus's eyes locked with Flavia's. "We're dealing with something far worse than Ram." From the farthest edge of the vault, shadows pooled, twisting into the faint outline of a figure. Tall, robed in shimmering gold, with eyes like burning coals. Flavia's rifle hummed, aimed squarely at the apparition. "Marcus, is that?" "No," Marcus whispered. "It's not Ramses. It's something older." The figure raised a hand, and the vault trembled once more. Marcus gripped his blade tightly, stepping forward. "Whatever you are, we won't let you take this place." The figure's gaze burned brighter, and the chamber plunged into darkness. Outro Extra, Vatican Archive Addendum, November 16, 2085. Vault breach detected at 2200 hours. Marcus Antonius and Flavia Orsini entered unaccompanied. The crucible remains intact, but fluctuations in the leyline grid have intensified. Observation continues. Vatican security has expanded containment protocols around the crucible vault, with specialized units posted at all access. In the end, we never close the door. We hold it ajar, hoping light returns. Flavia. Bonus Chapter 10, The Obsidian. Opening quote. "The desert remembers what the mind forgets. Beneath the shifting sands lie the echoes of eternity." Annunaki proverb, recovered fragment, Zion Ark. Big news article. Headline: Mysterious phenomena spotted across Sahara. Annunaki site awakens after 3,000 years. Cairo, December 3, 2085. In a startling development, satellite imagery has detected anomalies deep within the heart of the Sahara Desert. A vast structure, previously buried beneath shifting dunes, has surfaced, revealing intricate glyphs and towering obelisks reminiscent of Annunaki architecture. Local tribes have reported strange lights emanating from the site during twilight hours. Experts from the Vatican's Metasphere division confirmed that leyline readings in the region have surged, paralleling disturbances seen during the Rift crisis in Vatican City. This site was believed to be myth, stated Dr. Kalen Orman, chief archaeologist. If the Annunaki marked this place, it may have been sealed for reasons we cannot fathom. Zion operatives have cordoned off the area, preventing unauthorized access. Resistance factions have accused Zion of hoarding relics that may hold crucial technological advancements. Tensions are rising as rumors circulate of an artifact known as the Obsidian Mirage, a device believed to project illusions so vivid they blur the boundary between reality and the metasphere. Short story, Obsidian Dunes, Sahara Desert, December 5, 2085. Marcus Antonius shielded his eyes from the wind as a wall of sand rose over the excavation site. The desert sun bled orange across the horizon, painting shadows that stretched unnaturally long over the ancient obelisks. The obsidian mirage lay before him, half buried, yet pulsating faintly with an inner glow. The wind whispered through the dunes, carrying faint echoes that sounded almost like voices. Flavia Orsini stood at the base of the nearest obelisk, her fingers tracing the Annunaki glyphs carved into its jet-black surface. "It's not just an illusion," she said. "This entire site feels displaced." Marcus knelt beside a sunken dais, brushing aside sand to reveal more glyphs arranged in spirals. His fingertips tingled as he made contact with the smooth obsidian surface. The symbols shimmered faintly beneath his touch, reacting as if aware of his presence. "I've seen this pattern before," Marcus muttered, narrowing his eyes. "In the vault beneath Vatican City, but the markings here seem incomplete." Flavia stepped back, scanning the shifting dunes beyond the site. "We're not alone out here. The shadows are moving," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising wind. Marcus's hand instinctively rested on the hilt of his blade. The air felt heavier, laced with something ancient and watching. Out of the corner of his eye, Marcus caught the faint outline of a figure, shimmering, golden, and faceless just beyond the obelisks. "Ramses?" Flavia whispered, her breath hitching. "No," Marcus replied, his grip tightening. "Something older." The figure raised an arm, and the desert around them warped. The obelisks twisted unnaturally, stretching skyward like serpents reaching for the heavens, and the sands beneath their feet solidified into smooth, reflective glass. Marcus blinked, and suddenly he was standing in an unfamiliar city, its streets paved with obsidian and lined with towering statues of Annunaki gods. "This isn't real," Marcus said, his voice echoing unnaturally through the empty streets. "It's the mirage." Flavia's voice drifted from somewhere behind him, muffled and distorted. He turned to find her reaching for him, but her hand passed through his shoulder like mist. Her expression flickered with concern. "Marcus, if you can hear me, you need to break the illusion. You're slipping deeper." Marcus clenched his fist, grounding himself. The obsidian city felt too solid beneath his boots, and the statues watching him from the shadows felt too real to dismiss. The golden figure reappeared, now standing atop a raised platform at the city's center. Its gaze pierced into Marcus's thoughts, unraveling memories and pulling at the edges of his consciousness. "You seek what was never yours to wield," the figure intoned, its voice layered with echoes of countless others. "Leave or be consumed by the desert's memory." Marcus stepped forward, drawing his blade. The obsidian city shimmered around him, the edges beginning to fragment into grains of sand. "No," his voice steadied. "I won't leave without answers." With a swift lunge, Marcus's blade struck the entity. The figure shattered into fragments of light, scattering across the desert. The city dissolved around him, and Marcus found himself standing once more in the shifting sands of the excavation site. Flavia reappeared at his side, solid and real, her hand pressed against his shoulder. "You did it," she said, relief softening her voice. Marcus exhaled slowly, sheathing his blade. "No, it let me go." Extra Classified Zion Intelligence Report, the Mirage Anomaly Transcribed Neural Scan, Operative Number 2179, begin transcript. I entered the perimeter just before sunset. The dunes felt wrong, as if they shifted faster than they should under the wind. I detected faint ripples in the Metasphere overlay, consistent with leyline bleed. When I approached the obelisk, I saw it, no reflection, no shadow, but standing there like a hole in the world. It whispered something I can't translate, but the sensation lingered even after I stepped back. The The glyphs flickered in a sequence I've never logged before. I'm requesting neural dampeners and an immediate extraction team. The mirage isn't dormant, it's waiting. Numerative 2179 is currently in a medically induced coma following unexplained neural degradation. No physical injuries detected. Following the anomalous event at Obsidian Dunes, leyline activity in the region has increased by 42%. Further investigation required. Operatives are advised to avoid the area without advanced neural dampeners. Extra, Pop Culture Nexus, VR Underground podcast transcript. All right, folks, welcome back to VR Underground. Let's talk about the crazy buzz around this obsidian mirage thing in the Sahara. We've got users claiming Metasphere glitches are bleeding into real life. You heard me, real life. One player claims they saw a golden figure right in their living room after trying to decrypt those leaked glyphs. And get this, our pal over at Rift Runner Arcade says his sim shut down for 6 hours after someone mirrored the obelisk spiral carvings. I'm telling you, this is next-level immersion. Or maybe Zion's just testing tech we're not supposed to have. Either way, don't mess with ancient alien VR unless you want ghosts in your fridge. All right, folks, welcome back to VR Underground. Let's talk about the crazy buzz around this obsidian mirage thing in the Sahara. Expanded journal entry, Marcus Antonius, December 6th, 2085. I still feel the sand beneath my feet, though I haven't left the camp in hours. The mirage lingers, not as a memory, but as something deeper, like a presence embedded beneath my skin. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. The city, the statues, the figure atop the dais. Flavia says I was only gone for a few minutes, but it felt like days within the mirage. The streets I walked were real, the texture of the obsidian beneath my boots undeniable. I can still hear the wind moving through the hollowed corridors of that impossible place, as if the stones themselves were breathing in tandem with me. I wonder if the mirage has always been there, waiting for someone to notice. Or maybe it noticed me first. There was no battle, no victory, just a test I never knew I was taking. And I can't shake the feeling that the mirage allowed me to leave. Why? I struck at the figure, but I doubt that was what saved me. The light scattered like embers in the wind, but I could feel it watching, even as the desert returned around me. Something ancient lies beneath the dunes. The Annunaki didn't abandon this place. They sealed it. But I wonder if they sealed something in or tried to lock something out. Even now, I feel that I haven't left the mirage at all. I write these words by lantern light, but the shadows cast on my tent walls seem longer than they should be. I find myself checking my reflection, half expecting to see that golden figure staring back at me. The obelisks hum at night. Flavia doesn't hear it, but I do. I think whatever watches from beneath the sand isn't finished with me yet. The obsidian mirage revealed fragments of something lost, something the Annunaki buried not just beneath the sand, but beneath layers of time itself. Outer quote, "The desert keeps what it claims, but sometimes it lends its secrets to those who listen." Chapter 31, The Eye of the Veil. Opening quote, "Where the veil thins, the watchers gather. One must tread carefully, for not all who observe are bound by the rules of men." Annunaki record fragment, Vatican Archive. News article, headline, Leyline disturbances surge near Constantinople. Nexus breach feared. Constantinople, December 10th, 2085. Local authorities and Metasphere technicians are scrambling to address an unprecedented spike in leyline interference near the Hagia Sophia. Citizens have reported strange visual anomalies, flickering lights, and transient figures appearing near ancient sites. Some witnesses claim to have seen angels of gold along the basilica's outer perimeter. Zion's Ministry of Stability has issued a warning to travelers and deployed containment teams, while resistance sources accuse Zion of activating dormant Annunaki technology beneath the city. Vatican scholars suggest the interference may be linked to an ancient artifact known as the Eye of the Veil, a relic believed to thin the boundary between physical reality and the metasphere. Despite containment efforts, the disturbances continue to escalate, prompting fears of a nexus breach similar to the Vatican Rift crisis. The ministry has not confirmed or denied the presence of Annunaki artifacts in Constantinople, but insists the situation is under control. Zion internal memo, Division Theta, eyes only. The eye is stirring beneath Hagia Sophia. Its resonance has begun disrupting metasphere stability across 3 nodes. Resealing protocols are in place, but we require a field operative with direct experience handling Nexus-tier artifacts. Antonius has been flagged for potential deployment. Time is critical. Failure risks full veil collapse. Narrative timestamp, December 11th, 2085, Underground Annex, Hagia Sophia. Journal entry. Marcus Antonius, December 11th, 2085. There's something wrong beneath Constantinople. The air feels stretched thin, like the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing against my skin. Flavia says it's just residual energy from the leyline surge, but I know better. This isn't the first time I've felt the veil tremble. The eye of the veil is somewhere close. I can hear it, even when the chamber is silent. It hums faintly, threading whispers through the cracks in the stone. I haven't told Flavia, but I've seen shadows moving where light should not bend. Whatever sleeps down here is waking. I won't let what happened in the Vatican happen again. This time, I'll stop it before the breach opens. Narrative: Marcus Antonius descended the stone staircase beneath the Hagia Sophia, his footsteps unnaturally loud, as though the stone itself was hollow and listening. Each step echoing unnaturally, as if the chamber extended far beyond its physical limits. The lantern in his hand sputtered, its flame flickering each time he passed an Annunaki glyph carved into the ancient walls. Flavia Orsini followed closely behind, her eyes scanning the passage for any signs of interference. "Zion's already been through here," she whispered, tapping the data slate strapped to her forearm. "Their containment field is active, but the readings are erratic. Whatever's down here isn't fully restrained." Marcus paused at the edge of a large circular vault door, his palm resting against its cold surface. The glyphs embedded in the metal pulsed faintly beneath his touch. "The eye of the veil doesn't submit to containment," he said. "It adapts." Flavia stepped beside him, adjusting the rifle on her shoulder. "So do we." The door groaned open, and Marcus led the way into the inner sanctum. The chamber beyond stretched far wider than the architecture of Hagia Sophia should have allowed. Obelisks ringed the space, their surfaces reflecting faint images that shifted as Marcus approached. He glimpsed flashes of his own reflection, but distorted, fragmented into multiple versions of himself, each taking a different path. Flavia exhaled sharply, her visor flickering with static interference. It's bending the metasphere inside the vault, reality starting to fray at the edges. Marcus stepped forward cautiously, the hairs on the back of his neck rising. The obelisks hummed louder, their reflections warping in the polished stone floor as if submerged beneath dark water, the resonance vibrating through his bones. At the center of the chamber lay a pedestal, atop which rested the eye, a spherical artifact no larger than Marcus's hand, carved with spiraling glyphs that seemed to move under his gaze. As he approached, the shadows around the chamber shifted. From between the obelisks, figures emerged, golden silhouettes with hollow eyes. Marcus recognized them immediately. "Watchers. They're not supposed to manifest this close to the physical plane," Flavia said, raising her rifle. "They're here for the eye," Marcus replied, gripping the blade at his side, "and they won't leave without it." One of the watchers stepped forward, its golden form rippling as if struggling to hold shape, its hand outstretched with a deliberate slowness that felt more like a test than a threat. Marcus felt the weight of its gaze, as though it was unraveling him layer by layer. He drew his blade, the steel shimmering faintly in the presence of the artifact. "I know why you guard this place," Marcus said quietly, "but I can't let it remain unsealed." The watcher did not respond. Its hand hovered inches above the eye, and Marcus stepped closer, his blade cutting a line of light between them. In that moment, the veil between them thinned. Marcus saw glimpses of another world, one where the Hagia Sophia stood not as a basilica, but as a towering black structure etched with Annunaki glyphs. The watchers moved freely through its corridors, their hollow eyes turned skyward toward a pale sun. Marcus blinked, and the vision faded. The chamber returned, but the weight in the air remained. Flavia's voice broke the silence. "Marcus, the containment field is weakening." "I know," he said, "but we can't leave it like this." With a deep breath, Marcus reached for the eye. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the obelisks flared with light, and the watchers dissolved into golden mist. The chamber darkened, the humming ceasing, as if the artifact had consumed the room's energy. Marcus exhaled, cradling the eye in his hand. Its surface pulsed faintly against his palm, warmer than he expected, as if the artifact recognized his touch. It's done. Flavia lowered her rifle. Let's get out of here before Zion decides we're part of the anomaly. Marcus nodded, casting one last glance at the now empty chamber. The veil had closed, but he knew better than to believe it would stay that way for long. Outro Extra. Vatican Internal Report. Artifact recovered, December 12, 2085. Operatives Antonius and Orsini successfully retrieved the Eye of the Veil from Constantinople. Artifact secured within Vatican vaults. Fluctuations in regional ley lines have stabilized. Watcher activity subsided following retrieval. Continued observation required. Outro quote, some doors once opened are not meant to close. Marcus Antonius. Chapter 32, The Fractured Path. Opening quote, a cracked mirror shows many faces, but none reveal the truth. Annunaki Reflection Hymns, Fragment 14. News article, headline, Unrest in the lower wards. Metasphere glitches cause panic in ascendancy districts. Venice, December 17, 2085. A wave of glitches rippling through the lower metasphere layers has left parts of Venice's ascendancy district in chaos. Residents report reflections moving out of sync, distorted holograms, and sudden apparitions resembling historical figures. Some witnesses claim to have seen entities adorned with golden sigils flickering along canal pathways at night. Zion's Ministry of Stability dispatched emergency containment teams, citing localized fissures in metasphere harmonics. Resistance leaders argue this is the result of unchecked artifact interference, particularly around submerged Annunaki ruins beneath the city. This marks the fourth incident in as many weeks, with containment efforts struggling to stabilize the area. Vatican representatives have urged calm, warning against speculation regarding the return of the fractured path, an ancient phenomenon believed to thin the boundary between the living and the echoes that linger beyond. Intro Extra Vatican Metaphysical Brief, Eyes Only, December 16, 2085. Metasphere disruptions around Venice have intensified. Fragmentary glyphs matching pre-collapse Annunaki pathways have surfaced along canal routes. Monitoring teams report auditory anomalies consistent with early-stage fractured path resonance. Increased security measures are advised, requesting Operative Antonius to assess alignment shifts directly. Narrative timestamp, December 18, 2085, Ascendancy District, Venice, 0300 hours. Narrative Part 1. The mist hung low over the Ascendancy District, blurring the edges of the canal as Marcus Antonius crossed a narrow stone bridge. The lamps lining the water's edge flickered unnaturally, casting faint reflections across the surface. Flavia Orsini walked a step behind, her rifle cradled low against her chest. You feel it too, right? Flavia's voice barely carried over the stillness. Marcus slowed his pace, eyes scanning the alleyways threading along the canal. The air's heavy. The path is close. They stopped at the center of the bridge. Marcus knelt, brushing his hand against the stone. His palm tingled, faint glyphs glowing beneath layers of frost and age. He traced them carefully. These carvings are Annunaki, Marcus muttered, older than anything registered in Vatican archives. Flavia adjusted the display on her visor. Leyline interference is spiking hard. Whatever's down there isn't dormant anymore. Beneath the water, reflections stretched unnaturally, as if the city below moved slower than the one above. Then the shapes began to change. Golden silhouettes flickered in the canal, their forms stretching and warping like smoke caught in water. The figures bore faint outlines of elaborate headdresses and layered robes, adorned with intricate glyph patterns that mirrored those of the Annunaki relics Marcus had seen in Vatican vaults. Small fragments of gold trim glinted beneath the water's surface, as if time itself hadn't fully claimed these echoes. The figures bowed low, their golden light dimming at the edges, as though dissolving into the ripples beneath them. Faint outlines of ancient robes and headdresses shimmered briefly, revealing fragments of something long forgotten before fading once more into the mist. Marcus, Flavia warned, tightening her grip on the rifle. I see them. He rose, resting his hand lightly on the hilt of his blade. Their echoes, fragments caught between this world and the next. The figures continued their procession, but one paused directly beneath Marcus's reflection. It lifted its head. Hollow eyes met Marcus's gaze, glowing faintly. The air around him thickened. It sees me. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. Flavia took a half-step closer. Do we wait for it to act? Marcus shook his head, stepping back from the bridge's edge. The memory of the Vatican breach flickered through his mind. how the path had opened too quickly, and how they had been unprepared. He remembered the way the echoes poured through, not as enemies, but as remnants of something forgotten, something that did not belong. Marcus had hesitated then, and the price had been heavy. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. No, we move before it crosses fully. Journal entry, Marcus Antonius, December 18th, 2085. The echoes aren't fading. Every time I return to the canals, I see them, walking beneath the surface, as if replaying moments of a world long gone. Their presence lingers with me long after I leave, shadows of them appearing in the corners of my vision when I least expect it. I feel their weight pressing against my thoughts, an unspoken reminder that something ancient and unfinished stirs beneath the water. It's no longer just a curiosity. It's becoming a part of me, something I carry whether I want to or not. I know better than to linger too long. Flavia insists they're just shadows, but I've seen how shadows behave. These aren't memories. They watch. Tonight, one of them looked directly at me. I could feel it reaching, testing the veil between us. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but I recognized the pull. It's the same feeling I had beneath Hagia Sophia. The path is unraveling faster than I expected. If the containment field fails, the echoes won't stay beneath the water. The last time the path opened fully, it bled across entire districts, leaving behind streets that no longer reflected the present, but fragments of the past. Those who crossed into those streets never returned the same, if they returned at all. The Vatican's archives speak of entire neighborhoods swallowed by reflections, lost to versions of themselves that hadn't existed for centuries. If the breach expands, the city may lose more than just ground. It may lose time itself. They'll step into the city, and Venice will become just another reflection of something long buried. Tomorrow, I'll descend to the lower canals. If there's a breach forming, I need to see it firsthand. Narrative Part 2. The lower canals of Venice were silent as Marcus and Flavia navigated the labyrinthine pathways. The sound of distant water dripped steadily somewhere ahead, echoing faintly off the stone walls. Marcus's lantern reflected in jagged shards along the slick surfaces, catching glimpses of shifting shadows that weren't there when he looked directly. The air carried a faint metallic tang, and every step felt heavier, as if the very ground was reluctant to let them pass. Beneath the Ascendancy district, Marcus's lantern flickered against the slick stone walls, casting elongated shadows that danced along the corridor. The air was damp and thick with the scent of ancient stone, and beneath his fingertips, the walls felt unnaturally cold, smooth where the Annunaki glyphs stretched deeper into the darkness. Each symbol seemed to hum faintly as the lantern's glow passed over it, their forms shifting subtly as if responding to the light. "We're getting close," Flavia murmured, visor sweeping for leyline anomalies. Marcus stopped at the entrance to a flooded tunnel, where the water barely rippled against the carved stone archways. The faint sound of distant footsteps echoed unnaturally along the passage, though Marcus knew no one had crossed this way for hours. A flicker of light, cold and blue, flashed momentarily beneath the water's surface, gone as quickly as it had appeared. He squinted, but the tunnel ahead revealed nothing except the endless reflection of stone and shadow. A faint hum vibrated beneath his feet. He knelt, touching the surface of the water. The reflection beneath him shifted, forming the outline of a robed figure standing on the far end of the tunnel. Marcus's reflection stood beside it. Flavia took a step back. "Marcus, that's not just an echo." Marcus tightened his grip on the lantern. The robed figure lifted its hand, beckoning silently. Its eyes, hollow and golden, flickered faintly. "They're guides," Marcus said, "trying to show us the breach." He remembered a similar moment beneath the ruins of Alexandria, a golden figure that had appeared leading him to an artifact that had sealed a rift before it could spread. The Annunaki left echoes of their custodians, entities that did not attack but lingered, pointing toward fractures only certain eyes could see. Marcus wasn't sure why he trusted them, but each time they revealed the veil's thinning, they had never led him astray. Not yet. The air thickened as the figure stepped forward, parting the water like glass. A low hum resonated through Marcus's bones, spreading like an icy current through his limbs. The lantern at his side dimmed, its glow flickering weakly as though suffocated by the weight of the air around them. A sharp, prickling sensation crept along his skin, each hair standing on end, as if unseen eyes were tracing his every movement. Marcus gritted his teeth, feeling the pressure build in his chest, a silent warning that whatever lay ahead was watching just as intently, as though the very light recoiled from the entity. The temperature dropped sharply, his breath curling into mist as the boundary between worlds stretched thinner. The figure's presence felt heavier now, like a weight pressing against Marcus's chest, and each movement seemed to ripple through the fabric of the space around them. Marcus felt the veil stretching thin. "Let's follow." Flavia hesitated. She scanned the dark water below, her voice quieter this time. "And if it's leading us into the breach, we've seen what happens when we follow too far, Marcus." Her hand hovered near the safety of her rifle, but she didn't raise it, just tightened her grip, as though that alone might hold back whatever lay beyond the veil. Marcus met the figure's gaze, gripping the hilt of his blade tighter than necessary. The echoes of past encounters whispered through his mind, times when hesitation had cost him dearly. He remembered the catacombs beneath the old basilica, the moment he had faltered and watched as an entire team vanished into reflections of themselves. That weight still lingered, a reminder of the price of uncertainty. Marcus inhaled slowly, grounding himself in the present. He wouldn't hesitate now. His breath slowed, and for a fleeting moment, doubt flickered in his chest. Every instinct told him to step back, to let the veil settle before something worse crossed over. But he knew better. The echoes never waited. If he hesitated, the path would unravel further, stretching its influence beyond the canals, beyond the city. He exhaled softly, steadying his resolve. Then we stepped through carefully. Outro Extra, Intercepted Transmission, Resistance Cell, December 19th, 2085. Antonius and Orsini are deep below the Ascendancy District. Activity spiking. Zion's containment field is failing faster than expected. If they can't hold the breach, we need to pull operatives out of the area immediately. The path is opening. Outro quote, "Some paths are crossed by choice, others by necessity." Marcus Antonius, Chapter 33, Beneath the Surface. Opening quote, "Those who gaze into the water too long risk drowning in more than their reflection." Annunaki Warning Inscription, Fragment 22. News article, headline, "Port disruptions worsen as Metasphere instability spreads to trade routes." Genoa, December 23, 2085. Metasphere anomalies have begun interfering with maritime trade operations across the Mediterranean, evolving into larger disruptions that ripple across trade networks. As the timeline advances toward 2099, these anomalies intensify, forcing factions to adapt technologically and militarily. Zion naval engineers have begun experimenting with breach-dampening technology, deploying modified vessels capable of navigating unstable zones. Meanwhile, resistance forces leverage mirrored breaches as opportunities for covert supply lines, redirecting trade routes through reflected paths that remain invisible to Zion's monitoring systems. However, this adaptation carries significant risk, as some vessels fail to return entirely, lost in what analysts suspect are fragmented timelines or mirrored echoes of future events. Fluctuations continue to grow, hinting that by 2099, the breach may fully synchronize with existing trade corridors, permanently altering the fabric of maritime travel, forcing Zion's naval outposts to restrict port access. Reports indicate entire cargo shipments appearing lost in transit, only to re-emerge days later with conflicting time signatures. Several captains claim to have encountered reflections of their ships sailing alongside them, vanishing without explanation. One captain described standing at the helm, watching in stunned silence as his reflection mirrored his every movement, right down to the nervous grip on the wheel. Another swore he saw ghostly figures on the deck of the mirrored vessel, saluting him before fading into mist. The stories have spread quickly, fueling unease and superstitions among the crews, many now refusing to sail under the cover of night. Vatican officials issued an advisory discouraging long-distance travel by sea until the anomalies subside. Resistance factions, however, speculate that submerged Annunaki ruins along ancient coastal paths may be contributing to the disruptions. Some resistance leaders see this as a chance to secure valuable artifacts before Zion intervenes, dispatching reconnaissance crews to gather intelligence. Others urge caution, fearing that tampering with the breaches may accelerate their spread. Meanwhile, fringe groups view the disturbances as omens, signs that the Metasphere's balance is unraveling in ways no faction fully comprehends. A joint investigation is underway, though officials warn that the disturbances could escalate if not contained. Intro Extra, Zion Maritime Dispatch, encrypted transmission, December 22, 2085. Containment measures along the Genoa shipping lane remain unstable. Several vessels report sudden disappearances from Metasphere tracking, returning with traces of Annunnaki's signature energy. Recommend Antonius for field analysis. His experience with breach phenomena may prove critical. Adjusting naval security protocols accordingly. Narrative timestamp December 24, 2098, Genoa Port, 0400 hours. Narrative Part 1. The docks of Genoa stretched in silence beneath the pre-dawn mist, the air thick with the tang of salt and rusted metal. Marcus Antonius walked along the edge of the pier, the rhythmic creak of moored ships filling the spaces between each step. Flavia Orsini followed close behind, her gaze sharp as she scanned the distant waterline. "You notice it too," Flavia said quietly, her eyes narrowing as she pointed toward the reflection of a ship bobbing along the water. Its masts were perfectly mirrored, but the flags, they rippled in the opposite direction. Marcus frowned. "The path's stretching further than I thought. It's reaching the sea now." His mind drifted to Alexandria, where the first signs of breach distortions had begun rippling through the Metasphere. He remembered the way the harbor shimmered unnaturally, ships anchored half in shadow as if trapped between two worlds. This felt the same, except now the breach wasn't isolated. It was spreading, and he couldn't shake the sense that they were already running out of time to contain it. He knelt at the water's edge, tracing faint Annunaki glyphs along the wooden planks beneath his palm. They pulsed faintly, as if responding to his touch. A low vibration hummed beneath the surface. "This wasn't here last time," Marcus muttered. He stood, glancing toward a cargo vessel rocking steadily against the dock. "The breaches are multiplying. If we don't seal them, the whole trade route could collapse into reflection," Flavia finished, shouldering her rifle. "I've already rerouted supply chains, but Zion's not going to like hearing this." "They never do," Marcus replied, squinting as a shadow shifted beneath the water. The silhouette of another ship drifted past, but when Marcus glanced up, the horizon remained empty. Journal entry, Marcus Antonius, December 24th, 2085. The path isn't just expanding beneath the canals of Venice. It's spilling into the open water. Today I watched the reflection of ships that don't exist. One of them mirrored a vessel I boarded years ago, long since decommissioned. I can't explain why, but part of me feels as if that ship never stopped sailing. It simply slipped beneath the surface of the Metasphere, lost between echoes. I can't shake the feeling that the breaches are pulling at fragments of the past, folding time in ways that should be impossible. I wonder if the fractures will eventually stretch beyond even the present, bleeding into futures we haven't lived yet. The possibility unsettles me. If echoes from the past can manifest, could distorted futures follow? Are we glimpsing what lies ahead, or simply watching shadows of paths we might never walk? The thought lingers, heavier than I'd like to admit. But what unnerves me more is the thought that these distortions aren't limited to history. They may be reaching forward, stretching into futures not yet written. If the breaches continue unchecked, I fear we may face echoes of what's to come, not just what has been. Narrative Part 2. Marcus tightened his coat against the cold wind that swept over the harbor as he and Flavia boarded a small reconnaissance vessel. The water beneath the hull shimmered faintly, fragments of reflected structures twisting along the waves. Flavia adjusted the vessel's guidance system, setting coordinates toward an area of the shipping route flagged by Zion sensors. Tracking's intermittent past the fourth quadrant. If something's out there, we'll find it. Flavia's voice was steady, but Marcus caught the subtle hesitation in her tone. If Zion hasn't already dismissed this as static, that is. Marcus stood at the bow, eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind cut across the deck, sharp and cold, carrying the briny scent of the sea. Each gust brought with it the faint creak of rigging from distant, unseen vessels. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the railing, leaning forward as if to catch a clearer glimpse of the shadows dancing along the waves. The cold seemed to seep through his coat, tightening his muscles as the faint hum beneath the water grew stronger, pressing against the edges of his consciousness like a half-remembered dream. The distant moan of a foghorn echoed faintly through the mist, blending with the rhythmic creak of the vessel as it cut across the water. Beneath him, the boards groaned softly with each shift in weight, and the cold wind carried the faint scent of brine and damp wood. Every now and then, the faint outline of a ship would flicker across the waves, gone as quickly as it appeared. Marcus couldn't shake the suspicion that these fleeting images were more than mere anomalies. They felt familiar, as if the Metasphere was reaching into his past, pulling forgotten vessels back into existence for reasons he dared not understand. Was this the work of the path, or something older, stirring beneath the surface? Leaving Marcus wondering if the reflections were even meant to be seen. "There," Marcus said, pointing ahead. "See that?" Flavia slowed the vessel. A massive shape loomed just beneath the waterline, an inverted reflection of a port that shouldn't exist. The spires twisted unnaturally, their jagged forms resembling Annunaki temple architecture, etched with flickering glyphs that glowed faintly beneath the waves. Marcus felt his breath catch as his eyes traced the patterns, each glyph stirring a memory he couldn't fully place. Flavia shifted beside him, her grip tightening on the rifle at her side. "I don't like this," she muttered, her voice low. "It feels aware." Marcus nodded slowly, unable to shake the sensation that the ruins weren't just remnants. They were watching. Long-forgotten faction banners, tattered and barely visible, hung from shadowy docks that stretched into the abyss. "That's not on any chart," Flavia muttered. She glanced at Marcus, eyes narrowing. "If this isn't in Zion's records, do you think the Resistance knows about it? Or are we the first ones seeing this?" She glanced at Marcus. "Have you seen anything like this before?" Marcus's grip tightened on the railing. His joints ached more these days, and the cold bit deeper than it once did. Years of navigating breaches and chasing shadows had left their mark, physically and mentally. But experience had also sharpened his instincts. "We need to get closer," he repeated, though now with the weight of someone who understood the cost of curiosity. His gaze lingered on the submerged port, not just as a threat, but as an echo of too many missions that had unraveled before him. Flavia shot him a glance, her silent hesitation mirroring the same thought. They weren't as young as they used to be, and this breach felt different. Marcus steadied himself, swallowing the creeping doubt. "One more time," he muttered under his breath. His gaze lingered on the submerged port, unease settling deep in his chest. The sight stirred something, memories of old expedition reports from sunken Annunaki sites, pages filled with warnings of places that shouldn't exist. He thought of the Constella and the way it vanished, and how this reflection felt less like a coincidence and more like a message. Marcus exhaled slowly, bracing himself. He wasn't sure if the port called to him, or if something beneath it was waiting for him to look closer. Outro Extra, Resistance Briefing, High Priority. Antonius and Orsini confirmed active breaches along Genoa's shipping lanes. Resistance operatives monitoring the area have expressed concerns that the Cult of the Rift may attempt to exploit these breaches for artifact recovery or ritualistic purposes. There are whispers that cult vessels have been sighted near the anomaly, though their intent remains unclear. The potential for factional interference adds urgency to containment efforts, as any unregulated interaction could destabilize the region further. Resistance operatives have reported similar anomalies near Istanbul and along the North African coast, though Zion has yet to publicly acknowledge them, fueling speculation that the faction is either unaware or deliberately concealing related data, suggesting a coordinated effort to track breaches globally. These disturbances appear to be following ancient Annunaki trade routes, raising concerns of broader disruptions if left unchecked. Outro quote, "The sea does not forget what it has taken, nor does it return it whole." Bonus Chapter 11, The Shattered Horizon. Opening quote, "The end of one age is the mirror to the dawn of another. Only those who can see beyond their reflection will shape what comes next." Annunaki Fragment, Recovered Translation 77C. News article, headline, Global Rift Network nears collapse as Metasphere anomalies surge in major cities. Geneva, June 4, 2097. A wave of Metasphere distortions has destabilized urban infrastructure across major population centers, sparking mass evacuations and unprecedented resource shortages. Zion's global containment teams report fractures expanding along the old Annunaki pathways, with reflected cities appearing intermittently across Tokyo, New York, and Alexandria. Resistance factions warn that the path has grown irreversible, with splinter groups advocating for aggressive integration into reflected zones rather than containment. Leaders within the resistance propose establishing permanent settlements along stabilized breach lines, believing that humanity's survival may depend on adapting to mirrored environments. Others call for covert alliances with rogue corporate entities, hoping to leverage private sector technology to fortify resistance strongholds. Internal debates over the morality of such alliances continue to fragment the movement, urging immediate adaptation rather than continued containment. Cult of the Rift activity is rising, with unconfirmed reports of their operatives sabotaging Zion stabilization efforts by disrupting leyline anchors and corrupting breach seal protocols. This has led to entire sectors of mirrored cities becoming unstable, forcing Zion teams to abandon key containment zones. Resistance analysts warn that further interference could accelerate full synchronization between the Metasphere and the physical world, escalating the crisis ahead of projections. In Paris and Istanbul, meanwhile, the Vatican has issued a dire statement, though internal reports reveal fractures within their leadership. A faction within the Vatican, led by Cardinal Vieri, advocates for aggressive containment using forbidden Annunaki relics, while more conservative members warn of catastrophic consequences. This divide has left Vatican forces slow to act, further straining cooperation with Zion and the resistance. Marcus and Flavia's efforts to secure breach zones are frequently caught in the midst of these power struggles, complicating their mission as allegiances within the Vatican shift unpredictably. Humanity stands on the threshold of a mirrored future. Whether we step forward or fall is a matter of unity. Civil unrest continues to escalate as corporate territories, including those controlled by EOS Dynamics and Atlantean Holdings, begin privatized containment efforts. EOS Dynamics has deployed private security forces to maintain order, but reports indicate increasing clashes with local resistance cells. Atlantean Holdings, on the other hand, has sealed off entire districts, offering sanctuary to the elite, while leaving lower-tier settlements vulnerable to breach anomalies. Marcus has received conflicting reports of rogue executives leveraging Metasphere rifts to smuggle artifacts, further blurring the line between corporate ambition and survival. Including those controlled by EOS Dynamics and Atlantean Holdings, begin privatized containment efforts. Independent factions speculate that deeper rifts may lead to complete divergence between the physical world and the Metasphere by 2099. Intro Extra, Intercepted Transmission, Cult of the Rift, Internal Dispatch. Confirmed, reflected structures seen in the heart of Zion's eastern quadrant. The breach sings louder. We prepare to walk the mirrored streets of what is to come. Disruption teams are in position, awaiting signal from leadership. Narrative timestamp, January 7, 2098. Old Istanbul ruins, 1900 hours. Short story, Marcus Antonius stepped carefully over the shattered stones of what was once the Grand Bazaar. Each step crunched over fragmented tile, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient dust. A cold breeze whispered through the ruins, carrying the faint echo of footsteps that didn't belong to them. Marcus felt the chill seep into his boots, the uneven ground shifting slightly beneath his weight, as if the earth itself resisted their presence. Flavia Orsini's shadow stretched alongside his, cast long by the burning fragments of reflected sunlight bleeding through the breach. "It's louder here," Flavia said, tightening her scarf against the wind. "Like the air's thinner, feels stretched." Marcus nodded, his eyes drifting to the ghostly outline of an inverted spire. It reminded him of the ruins near Alexandria, where breach anomalies first bled into physical space. The spires there had whispered of forgotten histories, their shadows lengthening even in daylight. This one felt different, less like a remnant and more like a marker, as if the Annunaki had left it behind deliberately. Marcus couldn't shake the sensation that the spire was watching him back, its reflection holding secrets that refused to surface, that hovered just above the horizon. The reflection of old Istanbul flickered against the ruins, half submerged beneath the shifting waterline. Buildings crumbled in reverse, rebuilding themselves only to shatter again in a cycle that felt more like memory than physical space. Zion's report said this area stabilized last week, Marcus knelt by a broken mosaic tile, brushing his fingers along faded Annunaki glyphs beneath the debris. They pulsed faintly at his touch. They were wrong. Flavia glanced back at the entry point of their reconnaissance route, her brow furrowed. The unease she felt wasn't new, but lately it lingered longer. Marcus's obsession with the Constella and the breaches felt like a path with no return. She wondered if he saw the toll it was taking, or if he even cared. Each mission seemed to pull him further from Zion's command structure, and Flavia wasn't sure how much longer she could follow him without questioning her own loyalty. The fractures in the Metasphere weren't the only ones growing, and she feared that sooner or later something would break between them. Resistance teams were pulled out 2 days ago. They didn't wait for confirmation. It's bad enough we're here alone. We're not alone, Marcus replied, gesturing toward the fractured skyline. Beyond the breach, faint silhouettes moved across the water, figures walking paths long forgotten, their forms translucent and drifting out of sync with the present. One figure, larger than the rest, paused to look directly at them. Its form was humanoid but stretched unnaturally, as if time itself bent around its presence. A faint, iridescent shimmer traced the edges of its body, casting flickering shadows across the water. Marcus's breath caught in his throat, the weight of unseen centuries pressing down on him. Flavia gripped her rifle tighter, her pulse quickening as the figure's eyes glowed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the breach. It felt like the embodiment of a question, one Marcus wasn't certain he wanted answered. Its eyes shimmered with an electric glow. "Annunaki," Flavia whispered. "No," Marcus said. "Not yet." The entity stepped forward, its reflection parting the water as if the surface were glass. Marcus's breath hitched and his pulse quickened, the chill of the air suddenly heavier against his skin. He felt the weight of its presence press down on him, like the slow turning of forgotten machinery deep beneath the surface. A faint hum filled his ears, vibrating through the ground beneath his feet. The closer the figure approached, the harder it became to ignore the sharp pull in his chest, as if the breach itself recognized him. Marcus felt the weight of its gaze press against his chest, familiar yet distant. The outlines of its armor mirrored ancient designs he had seen in Vatican vaults. It carried no weapon, yet its presence felt like one. "This isn't a warning," Marcus muttered. "It's an invitation." "Invitation to what?" Flavia asked, her hand on the rifle at her side. Marcus took a step closer to the edge of the breach, to witness what's coming. The figure raised a hand, and the world beneath them shifted. The reflection of the city rippled outward, carrying echoes of ships, structures, and faces Marcus barely recognized. Some appeared familiar, fragments of markets he had once passed through, or figures who resembled long-forgotten comrades. Others were more abstract, distorted in ways that hinted at possible futures, faces blurred by the weight of time. Marcus found himself staring longer at one particular figure, its half-formed features stirring a memory he couldn't place. The sensation left him uneasy, as if the breach was not just showing the past, but offering glimpses of paths yet to unfold. But one ship stood out, the Constella. It drifted along the mirrored canal, whole and untouched. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "You said the same thing the last time," Flavia replied quietly. "Extra, resistance debrief, Shadow Fleet reports, classification, priority level black, ongoing anomalies, subject, reflected vessels along Mediterranean routes." Issued by Commandant Orsini, Division of Naval Containment, date, January 3rd, 2098, executive summary. Reflected vessels continue manifesting along Mediterranean trade corridors, prompting heightened alerts across resistance-controlled ports. Vessels appear without warning and exhibit phase shift anomalies that defy conventional tracking methods. Engagement attempts yield inconsistent results, with reflected ships vanishing the moment direct contact is established. Key observations. Pattern recognition. Manifestations are more frequent near ancient Annunaki ley lines and submerged ruins. Drones report recurring anomalies concentrated near Alexandria, Genoa, and the North African coast. Energy signatures. All recorded reflections exhibit residual Annunaki energy markers. Analysts speculate vessels may traverse mirrored waters outside standard temporal frameworks. Cult involvement. Surveillance intercepts confirm Cult of the Rift vessels trailing reflected ships. Intelligence suggests they view these anomalies as omens or divine heralds, further complicating containment efforts. Operational risks, containment challenges, unstable phase shift patterns render direct interdiction ineffective. Resistance vessels risk operational losses during interception attempts. Cult sabotage. Cult forces may actively disrupt Zion containment zones to further destabilize reflection zones. Early reports indicate interference with breach anchors along trade routes. Public unrest. Unconfirmed sightings have triggered unrest in key port cities, eroding resistance influence and control over coastal territories. Recommended actions: 1. Establish permanent watch posts at known reflection sites. Deploy sensor nets to detect phase shifts before full manifestations. 2. Authorize shadow operations targeting cult vessels suspected of harboring reflection-based artifacts. 3. Increase civilian awareness programs to mitigate panic and strengthen resistance authority in vulnerable trade corridors. Closing notes. Field commanders are advised to treat all reflected vessels as high-risk entities. Though no direct hostile actions have been reported, continued appearances raise questions regarding potential synchronization events between the Metasphere and the physical realm. Command advises full operational readiness. Efforts to capture these anomalies remain unsuccessful. Cult of the Rift activity observed near Alexandria. We recommend increased monitoring along submerged ruins. Previous encounters suggest these ships do not adhere to standard Metasphere navigation. Extra. Annunaki Research Division. Project Dawnbreaker. Artifacts retrieved from the submerged reflection near Cairo continue to offer critical insight into Annunaki breach manipulation. These artifacts, believed to function as mirrors within Metasphere pathways, serve dual purposes as stabilizers and conduits. Resistance scholars argue that the Annunnaki's technological foresight enabled them to build structures capable of influencing breach frequencies even after millennia of dormancy. Analysis of glyph patterns extracted from the mirrors indicates encoded messages layered beneath surface-level inscriptions. These patterns resonate with breach signatures detected across mirrored cities, suggesting a deliberate attempt by the Annunaki to seed points of interaction throughout the Metasphere. Some believe these encoded messages contain fragments of lost Annunaki knowledge, though deciphering them has proven slow and challenging due to the complexity of their design. Marcus Antonius's recent encounters with reflected structures have lent credence to the theory that Annunaki mirrors may be pivotal in either stabilizing or expanding breaches. Internal debates within the Annunaki Research Division highlight conflicting perspectives. Some propose immediate activation of recovered mirrors to counter destabilizing anomalies, while others caution that doing so without fully understanding the consequences may accelerate divergence. Additional expeditions are planned to Cairo's submerged ruins, though rising Metasphere instability threatens further excavation. Despite these risks, the potential benefits of unlocking Annunaki breach technology drive continued investment in Project Dawnbreaker. The fate of these mirrors may ultimately shape the balance between the physical world and the ever-growing Metasphere. Indicate that Annunaki technology may have intentionally left mirrors, structures that serve as both beacons and gateways. Resistance scholars believe these mirrors are not passive relics, but dynamic tools capable of stabilizing breaches or triggering further divergence. Marcus views them with a mix of caution and curiosity, recognizing their potential to alter the course of his mission. If harnessed correctly, these mirrors could either seal the path or open entirely new ones, though the risk of unintended consequences looms large. Within certain pathways, analysis of glyph patterns suggests encoded messages that resonate with the current breach frequency. The implication is clear. The Annunaki anticipated this divergence long before humanity's rise. Extra, Vatican Internal Report, Restricted Distribution. Increasing synchronization between reflected structures and physical cities signals a looming point of no return by late 2099. The papal envoy warns that without swift action, mirrored reflections could fully overlap their real-world counterparts, resulting in catastrophic distortions. Internal Vatican divisions have deepened as a result, fracturing long-standing unity within the upper echelons. Cardinal Vieri's faction pushes aggressively for the deployment of ancient Annunaki relics stored within Vatican vaults, advocating for their use as stabilizing tools. This proposal, however, meets fierce resistance from conservative members who believe activating these relics risks inviting further Annunaki influence, potentially reawakening dormant forces tied to the breaches. The divide has significantly slowed Vatican-led containment efforts, placing greater reliance on Zion and the resistance. Vatican operatives embedded within breach sites report increasing interference from the Cult of the Rift, whose presence disrupts field containment procedures. The cult's proximity to key reflection zones fuels speculation that they are deliberately attempting to provoke full synchronization. Vatican analysts warn that without containment, the Metasphere could permanently alter the fabric of reality by aligning with reflected worlds. In response, Vatican forces have begun quiet negotiations with Zion to secure advanced breach sealing technologies, though this alliance remains fragile due to conflicting doctrines. Marcus Antonius and Flavia Orsini's efforts to stabilize zones near Istanbul highlight the precarious nature of this cooperation. Internal memos reveal mounting pressure on Vatican leadership to deliver results, as failure to do so risks eroding public trust and fracturing their influence over global breach management efforts. And physical cities indicates a point of no return approaching by late 2099. The papal envoy suggests immediate mobilization of reliquary artifacts to mitigate the breach expansion. However, political divisions between Zion and resistance factions complicate coordinated efforts. Cult of the Rift disruptions worsen the situation, slowing containment. Expanded journal entry, Marcus Antonius, January 9, 2098. The breach at Old Istanbul wasn't like the others. I saw something or someone watching us from the other side. Not Annunaki, something that remembers them, carries their imprint. The closer we get to 2099, the louder these echoes become. I used to think we were dealing with fragments of the past, but now I'm not so sure. Maybe this is what the future looks like. The Constella was there. I saw it as clearly as I see these words. I know it was destroyed, but if it exists within the breach, what else does? The thought lingers, pulling at the edges of his resolve. The Constella wasn't just a lost ship. It was a reminder of the lives that vanished with it, the comrades he failed to save. If it could re-emerge from the breach, perhaps redemption lay within its mirrored hull. But Marcus couldn't ignore the darker possibility that the Constella's return heralded something far worse, a signal that the boundaries of past and future were crumbling faster than he anticipated. The weight of that uncertainty tightened his grip, as if holding on to the thought might somehow anchor him against the shifting tide. If we can recover it, can we rewrite what's coming? Or does the path lead only in one direction, forward, into whatever shape the breach demands? I don't know how much time we have left. I only know the breaches aren't waiting anymore. Outro quote: "The mirrored world calls to those who linger, but be warned, what answers may not remember mercy." Flavia Orsini, Resistance Operative. Chapter 34, Beneath the Tides of Tomorrow. Opening quote: "The ocean remembers everything, even the footsteps of those who never walked upon its shores." Annunaki Fragment 231b. News article, headline: Port cities brace for surge of breach anomalies as maritime trade hubs report unexplained vessel sightings. Rome, February 14, 2098. Coastal regions along the Mediterranean and Atlantic have reported an alarming increase in breach anomalies. Authorities from Zion's Naval Command confirmed sightings of mirrored vessels sailing alongside real-world counterparts near major ports, including Marseille, Alexandria, and Lisbon. Resistance factions warn that the synchronization between the Metasphere and the physical world is accelerating, disrupting civilian maritime traffic and straining local economies. Reports indicate trade delays as mirrored vessels force ships to alter their routes, with some port towns reporting unexplained disappearances. Fishermen and smaller traders have begun abandoning breach-prone areas, leading to economic isolation in certain regions, with breaches stretching into trade routes that were previously unaffected. Fishermen and traders alike speak of ghost ships drifting silently beneath the waves, disappearing as quickly as they appear. Atlantean Holdings has issued a statement denying involvement in anomaly proliferation, but confirmed their security divisions will increase maritime patrols along high-value routes. Resistance intelligence suggests Atlantean forces may be leveraging reflected vessels for covert trade, exacerbating instability along breach-prone waters. Zion has pledged to investigate further. Intro Extra, Classified Dispatch, Zion Naval Command. Surveillance drones deployed to monitor breaches along shipping lanes near Gibraltar have confirmed fluctuating phase shifts. One unidentified vessel has been reported trailing civilian craft along the Atlantic corridor, with no formal response from resistance or cult factions. Command advises limited engagement until full analysis is completed. Continue observation protocol. Narrative timestamp February 20th, 2098. Southern coast of Spain, 2200 hours. Narrative Part 1. Marcus Antonius stood at the edge of the deck, staring into the fog where the stars should have been. The stillness felt heavier tonight, pressing against his chest like an unseen hand. He had seen reflections before, anomalies, as Zion called them, but this felt different. The mirrored ship, gliding silently alongside their own, carried a weight he couldn't shake. Each ripple across the water seemed to echo too long, as if the breach itself was watching, waiting. Marcus's grip tightened on the railing. A decade of chasing breaches and half-formed ghosts had etched itself into his bones, but this felt more personal. The Constella had appeared again, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was no longer just a reflection, but a message meant solely for him. The moon's reflection rippled across the black water, broken intermittently by the faint outline of another ship. It mirrored their own, down to the flickering of lanterns and the movement of shadowed figures. We're being followed. Flavia's voice came from just behind him, low but steady. It's been tailing us since Alexandria. Marcus nodded, his eyes narrowing as the mirrored ship shifted slightly out of sync. It's not resistance, and it's not Zion. Flavia tightened the strap on her rifle, though her grip lingered longer than necessary. She trusted Marcus, she always had, but something in his voice unsettled her. He was chasing shadows again, and every time the Constella appeared, his focus narrowed. Flavia wasn't sure if he was following instinct or ghosts. She glanced at him sideways, studying the furrow of his brow, wondering how long it would be before his reflection stared back at him permanently. For now she kept quiet, rifle ready, but the doubt sat heavy in her chest. Cult of the Rift? Possibly. Or something else entirely. Marcus turned from the railing. His movements were slower now, burdened by the wear of years spent navigating the breach. The cold felt sharper against his skin, the familiar ache in his knee reminding him that the past decade had left scars beyond the visible ones. Keep eyes on them, but don't engage unless they cross. Journal entry, Marcus Antonius, February 21st, 2098. The breach activity grows worse by the day. I saw the Constella again today, if that's truly what it was. It appeared just as we passed the outer rim of Gibraltar's breach site, like a reflection distorted by old glass. I can't tell if it's a warning or an invitation. The more I see it, the less sure I am. Flavia thinks I'm chasing ghosts, but I know the breach is responding to something. Maybe us. Maybe it's waiting for me to act. Atlantean Holdings is moving aggressively along the Atlantic routes, driven by rumors that reflected vessels contain advanced Annunaki relics or lost technologies. Internal reports suggest the corporation is gambling on securing these artifacts before Zion or the Resistance can intervene. The potential for profit or catastrophic failure has divided Atlantean leadership, but so far, the lure of unprecedented power outweighs the risk. Their vessels cut dangerously close to breach zones, shadowing mirrored ships in hopes of extraction, regardless of the growing instability. Their vessels cut closer to the breaches than Zion's ever have. Either they know something we don't, or they're willing to risk it all for whatever's inside. I suspect the latter. Narrative Part 2. The sea was quiet except for the creak of wood beneath Marcus's boots. Flavia had retreated below deck, leaving him alone beneath the stars, or where the stars should have been. Only the breach's glow remained, faint but present, casting long streaks of light across the water's surface. Suddenly Marcus caught sight of the mirrored ship again. This time it was closer. The reflection no longer trailed behind but drifted alongside them, pacing their every move. From the corner of his eye, Marcus thought he saw someone standing at the helm of the reflection. His pulse quickened, a cold tension creeping up his spine. For a moment he thought it was a trick of the water, a distortion in the breach's glow, but the figure remained, unmoving, watching. Marcus felt a strange pull, curiosity mingling uneasily with dread. Was it just a reflection? Or was something else staring back at him through the breach? His grip on the railing tightened, knuckles white as he forced himself to hold its gaze, as if looking away might invite something far worse. A figure, wrapped in shadows but unmistakable in its posture, his own. His breath caught. It wasn't the first time he had seen reflections of himself in breach zones, but this felt different. Older, the shadowed Marcus mirrored the weary weight that had settled in his bones. He gripped the railing tighter. "We're running out of time." Outro extra, Resistance Naval Log, High Command Briefing. Vessels reported along breach zones show increasing signs of phase instability. Multiple mirrored reflections have been detected near civilian trade routes, triggering widespread unease. Atlantean Holdings patrol vessels have been spotted escorting reflected cargo ships, raising concerns about potential breach exploitation. Recommendations for immediate fleet redeployment and breach monitoring have been submitted. Engagement remains restricted until further observation clarifies intent. Ghosts of the past do not fade. They simply wait for the right current to carry them home. Flavia. Chapter 35, Reflections at the Threshold. In the echoes of the past, the future is often written. Annunaki proverb. News report, Global Metasphere Network. Breaking news, breach expansion near Neo-Jerusalem raises international alarms. Footage rolls of shimmering breach anomalies spreading across the desert near Zion's outer districts. In the background, the towering spires of Neo-Jerusalem pulse faintly with synchronizing leyline activity. Reports from on-site observers confirm that breach instability in the southern quadrant of Zion's influence is spreading. Independent factions are deploying containment measures, but Atlantean Holdings has begun large-scale mining of breach anomalies for technological advancements, deploying automated excavation units across multiple breach zones. Reports indicate that specialized drilling teams operate around the clock, extracting exotic materials believed to enhance leyline technology and weapon systems. This aggressive expansion is raising alarms within the Vatican and resistance, as the scale of operations risks triggering larger breach events that could destabilize the surrounding region. This controversial move places them at odds with the Vatican, whose operatives warn that tampering with the breach could accelerate its unpredictable expansion. A hooded figure, identified by the broadcast as a Vatican official, steps forward. His voice is strained and his tone urgent. "We cannot allow unchecked exploration of the breach. Each disturbance accelerates convergence. The closer we come to alignment, the more unstable the fabric of our reality becomes. Zion plays with forces they do not understand." In contrast, a representative from Atlantean Holdings appears on the next clip, standing in front of breach mining equipment. "We respect the concerns of other factions, but the technology hidden within these anomalies offers breakthroughs that could elevate humanity." Risk comes with innovation. Security footage from a nearby resistance outpost shows Atlantean transport convoys guarded by private militias. The convoy route passes dangerously close to Vatican territory, triggering heightened tensions along the border. Reports indicate that Vatican forces are monitoring the situation closely, deploying mobile sanctum units equipped with breach-suppressing relics along the perimeter. Advanced exorcist teams have been mobilized, utilizing hybrid energy disruptors believed to sever leyline interference. Any further breach disturbances could lead to direct confrontation, with the Vatican prepared to invoke emergency protocols, allowing for tactical strikes if Atlantean operations cross into sanctified zones. Zion has issued a statement urging both factions to de-escalate, but internal sources suggest that Zion leadership views this conflict as an opportunity to expand its influence in breach research. Footage rolls of shimmering breach anomalies spreading across the desert near Zion's outer districts. In the background, the towering spires of Neo-Jerusalem pulse faintly with synchronizing leyline activity. Reports from on-site observers confirm that breach instability in the southern quadrant of Zion's influence is spreading. Independent factions are deploying containment measures, but Atlantean Holdings has begun mining breach anomalies for technological advancements. This controversial move places them at odds with the Vatican, whose operatives warn that tampering with the breach could accelerate its unpredictable expansion. A hooded figure, identified by the broadcast as a Vatican official, steps forward. His voice is strained and his tone urgent. We cannot allow unchecked exploration of the breach. Each disturbance accelerates convergence. The closer we come to alignment, the more unstable the fabric of our reality becomes. Zion plays with forces they do not understand. In contrast, a representative from Atlantean Holdings appears on the next clip, standing in front of breach mining equipment. We respect the concerns of other factions, but the technology hidden within these anomalies offers breakthroughs that could elevate humanity. Risk comes with innovation. Intro Extra, Vault Reports. Classified document Resistance Intel Network Subject Anomalous Reflections, Observation Entry 459. Reflections cited in multiple breach zones are increasingly diverging from their original counterparts. Field agents report distorted expressions, unrecorded behavior patterns, and entities interacting independently of primary subjects. Marcus has noted that some reflections exhibit memories not yet experienced by the originals. He interprets these manifestations as potential warnings, glimpses of futures that could still be shaped. Though unsettling, Marcus is beginning to suspect that these reflections are not threats but guides, subtle indicators that the breach may possess a form of sentience or an awareness that mirrors his own curiosity. Analysis continues. Additional note: 2 new cases have emerged in the northern quadrant, both involving high-level Zion operatives encountering distorted versions of themselves. One operative reported that their reflection whispered warnings, but audio logs captured only static. A second operative vanished after reporting multiple breach-induced hallucinations, leading to speculation about growing instability within Zion's inner breach research circles. Internal whispers suggest that the breach may be responding to Zion's increasing attempts to manipulate it, triggering echoes of operatives from possible future states. Zion's research initiatives have intensified, with reports of experimental breach stabilizers and prototype containment devices being deployed across volatile zones. Some speculate that Zion's leadership is attempting to harness the breach as a power source, while others believe these experiments aim to create controlled gateways to expand their influence. These manipulations are believed to be accelerating breach instability, drawing increasing concern from resistance operatives monitoring the affected areas. The resistance is monitoring Zion's actions closely, as further anomalies could signal a larger breach event or indicate internal division within Zion leadership. Classified document, Resistance Intel Network Subject, Anomalous Reflections, Observation. Entry 459. Reflections cited in multiple breach zones are increasingly diverging from their original counterparts. Field agents report distorted expressions, unrecorded behavior patterns, and entities interacting independently of primary subjects. Marcus has noted that some reflections exhibit memories not yet experienced by the originals. Analysis continues. Additional note: 2 new cases have emerged in the northern quadrant, both involving high-level Zion operatives encountering distorted versions of themselves. One operative reported that their reflection whispered warnings, but audio logs captured only static. Narrative: 10:45 p.m. Outer Zion, breach containment zone. The wind cut sharply across the breach perimeter, carrying the metallic taste of latent energy through the air. Marcus adjusted the scope on his gauntlet, watching as the breach's edges flickered with rhythmic pulses. Next to him, Flavia crouched low, scanning the crystalline structures beginning to manifest along the cracked earth. "It's accelerating," Flavia muttered, her voice barely audible over the static hum from the containment pylons. "I've never seen them sink this quickly." Marcus tightened his jaw. "That's because they aren't supposed to. Something's forcing the synchronization." Flavia glanced at Marcus. "You think someone's controlling this?" Marcus's eyes didn't leave the breach. "Not someone, something. The Annunnaki's influence isn't subtle. They leave traces in the reflection." In the distance, the faint outline of Neo-Jerusalem's towers shimmered under breach light, distorted reflections dancing along their mirrored surfaces. Marcus felt the weight of each step as he led the team closer to the breach's heart. Time itself seemed malleable here. Each movement felt echoed in a moment that had yet to happen. Crystalline growths protruded along the breach perimeter, humming faintly. Marcus reached out, letting his gauntlet skim the edge of one formation. Energy coiled around his fingertips, sending faint ripples across the breach surface. Flavia tensed. "Marcus, you shouldn't," A pulse exploded outward, nearly knocking Marcus off his feet. The air trembled as a low-frequency hum rippled across the breach perimeter, sending nearby crystalline formations vibrating violently. Flavia stumbled slightly, instinctively raising her rifle as cracks spiderwebbed beneath their feet, faint trails of golden energy seeping into the fissures. Dust swirled up around them, carried by a sudden gust that felt unnaturally cold against their skin. Marcus steadied himself, his breath fogging in the chilled air as the breach light pulsed ominously overhead. Flavia gripped his arm, steadying him. "We can't keep getting this close without understanding what we're triggering. One day this breach might not let us leave." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Maybe that's the point. Secure uplink. The reflections aren't mere copies. Today I saw my own face in the breach, but older. The lines around my eyes, the way it looked back at me. There was recognition, not of who I am now, but of someone I meant to become. Zion believes the breach is a tool, a gateway to power. I'm beginning to suspect it's a mirror that shows not just the future, but the cost of chasing it." Addendum: Flavia thinks I'm reckless. She's not wrong, but there's a part of me that believes the breach holds answers Zion, and the resistance can't see yet. I need to understand it, even if it means stepping deeper than we ever have. Near 11:30 p.m., breach expansion zone. Marcus's steps slowed as they approached the breach's edge. The air crackled faintly, a constant low hum vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Each breath felt heavier, as if the atmosphere itself thickened the closer they drew to the anomaly. The breach's surface rippled subtly, distorting the faint light of Zion's skyline in the distance. A faint, rhythmic pulse echoed through the air, like the distant beat of a drum, reverberating in sync with Marcus's own heartbeat. Flavia adjusted her grip on her rifle, her eyes flickering to Marcus. "Feel that? It's almost like the breach is breathing." Marcus gave a slow nod, the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders. "I feel it, and I don't think we're alone." Across the shimmering surface, a distorted version of Zion's skyline stretched endlessly. Flavia raised her rifle, but Marcus held up a hand. "Wait!" His breath hung in the air, curling unnaturally as breach energy distorted the temperature around them. "Something's moving." From the reflection emerged a figure, not an enemy, but Marcus himself, stepping forward as if walking from another world. The reflection, Marcus paused, locking eyes with the original. Flavia's grip tightened. "Marcus, say the word." "No, hold on." Marcus stepped closer. The reflection mirrored him, but the eyes were wrong. They shimmered with faint traces of gold, the mark of Annunaki influence. Marcus's pulse quickened. He searched the reflection for clues, but it only stared back silently. "This isn't just a breach anomaly. It's a message." Outro Extra, Faction Update, Resistance Leadership Internal Memo. As breach expansions accelerate globally, emerging data points to increased Annunaki interference. Field teams report irregular energy signatures aligning with ancient Annunaki symbols detected within breach anomalies. Marcus's encounter with reflective anomalies displaying golden eye patterns further suggests deliberate manipulation rather than random breach behavior. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, viewed these anomalies as opportunities rather than threats. Each encounter seemed less like a warning and more like an invitation to decipher the breach's deeper intent. Flavia, on the other hand, remained skeptical, sensing danger where Marcus saw intrigue. Their differing perspectives continued to shape their approach to breach anomalies, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that these reflections held answers Zion and the resistance overlooked. Additionally, leyline fluctuations correspond with Marcus's proximity to active breach zones, indicating a potential link between his actions and breach responsiveness. The operatives monitoring Neo-Jerusalem have confirmed at least 2 separate instances of breach growth that coincided directly with Marcus's unauthorized excursions near containment zones. His presence appears to either stabilize or provoke breaches, though the distinction remains unclear. Whether these entities seek control, partnership, or observation remains unknown. Resistance analysts speculate that the Annunnaki's interference may stem from a desire to shape the breach into a stabilizing force, while others fear their goal is to redirect its energy for their own ascendancy. Some believe that the breach acts as a testing ground, filtering potential candidates through mirrored anomalies. Regardless, Internal debates within the resistance continue, with some factions urging a more aggressive stance toward Annunaki involvement, while others push for deeper observation and indirect engagement. What is clear is that Marcus's connection to breach anomalies grows stronger. Field agents are advised to monitor him closely. The next breach synchronization may reveal intentions that shift the balance of power, with Marcus potentially serving as the key to unlocking or restraining the breach's expanding influence. Resistance Leadership Internal Memo. As breach expansions accelerate globally, emerging data points to increased Annunaki interference. Whether these entities seek control, partnership, or observation remains unknown. What is clear is that Marcus's connection to breach anomalies grows stronger. Field agents are advised to monitor him closely. The next breach synchronization may reveal intentions that shift the balance of power. Outer quote, "To stare into the breach is to glimpse the future. To enter it is to shape it." Unknown Breach Hunter. Chapter 36, The Shattered Path. In the end, all roads converge beneath the weight of our choices. Excerpt from the Codex of Forgotten Lines. Newswire, global emergency alert worldwide. Breach anomalies reach critical levels. Global markets plunge as transport hubs fail, power grids falter, and communication networks collapse in major cities across the globe. Neo-Jerusalem on lockdown. Zion forces converge around core vaults. Reports from resistance outposts confirm that over 70 breach anomalies have emerged across 6 continents, with high-density zones forming around ley line nexuses. Local governments in Tokyo, Neo-London, and Cairo have declared states of emergency as breach reflections destabilize key infrastructure. Vatican warships move into low orbit. In a rare broadcast from Vatican Command, Cardinal General Ilara issued the following statement: "To all faithful, remain steadfast. The breach expands, but faith anchors reality. We deploy as peacekeepers, but should the vaults fall, we will not hesitate to act." Eyewitness accounts from Neo-Jerusalem report Atlantean holding skirmishes against reflected forces along Zion's outer defenses. The breach perimeter extends beyond the core, forcing mass evacuations of lower districts. Dr. Elaine Kirsch of the Resistance addressed the public. "This is no longer a localized event. The breach anomalies stretch beyond scientific containment. I urge every faction to abandon old rivalries and unite. We stand on the precipice of something far greater than we can comprehend." Global communication lines flicker intermittently, with Metasphere instability causing disruption to high-level encrypted transmissions. Resistance outposts in Neo-London report failed extractions of critical assets after encrypted channels collapsed mid-operation, leaving entire teams stranded behind breach zones. In Cairo, attempts to coordinate civilian evacuations faltered as communication blackouts spread across lower city districts. Military forces worldwide are deploying breach stabilizers in a last-ditch effort to contain the rapid expansion. Civilian casualties are estimated in the thousands and growing by the hour. The breach is no longer theoretical. We stand at the edge of what the Annunaki warned us of. This is the tipping point. Dr. Elaine Kirsch, lead theoretical physicist, Resistance broadcast. Intro extra message from Ramses II to Marcus, encrypted transmission, Metasphere depth 6. Marcus, I told you this day would come. The breach doesn't close for us. Consumes. Whatever we face today, make peace with it. Zion holds the vault, but the reflections, they're bleeding through faster than expected. Flavia's already in position. She trusts you. Don't make her regret it. R. Narrative timestamp Neo-Jerusalem, Inner Sanctum, 3 hours before the collapse. Marcus stood at the edge of the breach, gauntlet humming faintly in the dead air, his pulse matching the slow, rhythmic thrum of the breach's energy. The space felt heavier than it should, as if unseen gravity pulled at his shoulders. Sweat traced a thin line down his spine beneath the reinforced fabric of his jacket, but the cold that radiated from the breach numbed his fingertips. His breaths were shallow, measured, the metallic tang of breach fire lingering on his tongue. In the flickering glow, the jagged edges of the vault seemed to fold inwards, as if watching him just as intently as he studied them. A faint vibration in his gauntlet sent tiny sparks crackling across his palm, an ever-present reminder that the line between hunter and reflection was dangerously thin. The ley lines, once vibrant and contained beneath Zion's core, now coiled like serpents overhead, shimmering threads of reality unraveling in plain sight. Flavia knelt nearby, rifle aligned with the mirrored corridor ahead, her breathing calm but deliberate. "This is worse than the simulations," she muttered, adjusting the sight. "They're not just reflections anymore. They're learning." Marcus said nothing. The mirrored hall ahead twisted subtly, flickering with faint silhouettes that mimicked their every move. Each step forward felt like drifting into an ocean without a shore in sight. Ramses should have been here by now. Flavia's voice carried tension beneath the cool exterior. Marcus's grip tightened on his breech gauntlet. He will be, but doubt lingered beneath the surface. Ramses was never late, not without reason. Marcus knew better than to assume the breach hadn't taken its toll on his friend, yet the quiet absence gnawed at the edges of his confidence. The ley lines above pulsed. A reflection stepped from the corridor's edge, a perfect mirror of Marcus. Except the eyes burned gold. For a heartbeat, Marcus's steps faltered. The sight of his own form staring back at him, distorted by the breach's influence, sent a wave of nausea crawling through his gut. Was this how the breach saw him? Or worse, what he might become if he let the reflections pull him under? His chest tightened as the golden-eyed reflection tilted its head in unison, as if mocking the hesitation. Resolve steadied his breathing, but the crack in his confidence remained, festering quietly beneath the surface. "Contact," Flavia said sharply, aligning her shot. "Orders?" Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling the pulse of breach fire beneath his palm. "We end this, now." Journal entry, Marcus, I saw my reflection die today. Or maybe I died in its place. It's hard to tell anymore. The breach twists what's left of certainty, and Ramses was right. No one walks away unchanged. The reflections, they whisper louder now. Flavia says I'm imagining it, but Phoenix knows the signs. He's been running scans across the Metasphere, tracking distortions that pulse in sync with the breach. Zion's hiding something. I feel it beneath my skin every time I channel ley energy. Tomorrow, we press further into the vault. If we fail, it won't matter what secrets Zion holds. The breach will take every narrative, Part 1. The vault groaned as Marcus stepped through the archway. Flavia's silhouette drifted beside him, her weapon trained on the mirrored path that stretched infinitely ahead. Each footfall sent ripples across the crystalline floor, as if they walked across the surface of water. Behind them, Phoenix's voice crackled over comms. "You're approaching the threshold. The ley lines are destabilizing fast. If you're not out in 40 minutes, the breach locks down." Marcus's reply felt distant. Flavia knelt ahead, scanning with precision honed from years of navigating breach anomalies and hunting reflected threats. A former Zion scout turned resistance sharpshooter, she had walked paths others feared to tread. Her rifle, custom modified with breach stabilizers, hummed faintly as she aligned the scope. Marcus trusted Flavia's instincts. She had saved his life more times than he cared to count. And if anyone could predict the breach's next move, it was her. Mirrored contact. 3 shapes. 2 o'clock. They're watching us. Marcus's eyes narrowed, tracking the faint outlines along the vault wall. The reflections pulsed faintly, distorted versions of resistance scouts they'd lost weeks ago. "Hold position," he ordered, activating the gauntlet's charge. The breach fire within spiraled upward, casting golden threads of light across the floor. The mirrored figures moved in unison. Marcus's grip shifted. They're not backing down. Flavia's trigger finger hovered. "Then we take the shot." The shot split the mirrored silence. One reflection dropped, dissolving into crackling light that shimmered along the crystalline floor. The remaining 2 hesitated for a breath, then surged forward with unsettling fluidity, their movements more aggressive, as if compensating for the loss. Marcus barely had time to raise his breech gauntlet before the closest reflection's arm twisted into a blade, slicing through the air, inches from his face. He parried, the clash of breach energy reverberating like glass shattering in his ears. Flavia's second shot rang out, tearing through the shoulder of another reflection. It staggered but pressed on, limbs reforming as if the wound were inconsequential. "They're adapting faster," Marcus growled, stepping back to regain position. "Hold your ground. We don't let them overwhelm us." But the others advanced, shifting through the space like smoke and glass. Marcus lunged, breach fire crackling in his gauntlet as he slammed it into the nearest reflection. The force rippled outward, distorting the mirrored floor beneath their feet. "They're flanking!" Flavia barked, firing twice more. The corridor behind them flickered with faint echoes, reflections trying to step through. Marcus caught the movement. Phoenix, we're breaching the second layer. Stabilize the entry point behind us. Marcus's voice cut through the calm. Phoenix's hologram flickered overhead, his usually calm demeanor strained, the faint crackle in his voice betraying urgency. I'm patching through. You have about 15 minutes before the next surge. Move fast. The vault's architecture twisted ahead, narrowing into a corridor lined with jagged breach crystals. The air around them shimmered with an unsettling heat, the crystals radiating a low, pulsating warmth that seemed to throb in time with the breach fire in Marcus's gauntlet. The closer he stepped, the more the edges of his vision distorted, like looking through rippling glass. Static crackled faintly at his ears, and the taste of copper lingered at the back of his throat. The crystals hummed, alive with latent energy, and Marcus felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing from the shadows, as if the vault itself pulsed with awareness. Marcus's footsteps quickened. The heart of the vault is just ahead. If Zion's hiding something, it's there. Flavia fell in behind him, rifle scanning the edges. Her eyes flicked toward Marcus, gauging his movements. She'd seen this quiet determination before, the kind that burned brightest right before he threw himself into the fire. Despite their trust, she couldn't shake the thought that Marcus was carrying more weight than he let on. Flavia tightened her grip on the rifle. If he wouldn't protect himself, she'd make sure nothing else got the chance to finish what the breach started. Ramses better not be waiting there with a smirk. Marcus allowed a faint smirk. Wouldn't surprise me. His mind lingered on Ramses, on the years spent pulling each other from the brink, trading victories and losses like old scars. Ramses always found a way to turn survival into spectacle, yet this time felt different. There was a weight pressing down, one Marcus couldn't shake. Maybe it was the breach, or maybe it was the gnawing thought that not even Ramses could cheat this final encounter. Marcus exhaled softly, steadying his nerves, but the lingering unease trailed them both like shadows in the vault. They advanced carefully, shadows of the vault stretching unnaturally in their wake. Outro Extra Internal Memo. Zion High Command Classification Breach Containment Directive. To all active operatives. The breach anomalies at Vault Prime have escalated beyond projected containment measures. Effective immediately, all non-essential personnel are to evacuate outer zones. Operatives Marcus and Flavia have advanced to Breach Layer 2. Metasphere surveillance indicates increased reflection activity trailing their movement. Prepare reinforcements, but maintain safe distance until breach collapse is confirmed. Do not attempt unauthorized entry. The breach holds no mercy. Outro quote. Only those who embrace the fracture can reshape the world beyond it. Elias Thorne, founder of the Riftborn Society. Bonus Chapter 12, The Vault Heart. The line between the mirror and the man blurs in the breach. What emerges on the other side may not always be what entered. Archon Vasily Rourke, Zion Metasphere Council. Intro Extra. Atlantean Holdings Internal Memo. Subject Anomalous energy spikes detected in Vault Theta 7. Author Archon Vasily Rourke, Senior Excavation Officer. Internal distribution only, for Primarch level review. Vault Theta 7's breach perimeter has begun emitting pulsations on metasphere-aligned frequencies, but these aren't ordinary energy fluctuations. The pulsations are irregular, shifting in intensity, and sometimes reversing, mimicking mirrored anomalies seen only in higher metasphere sublevels. Zion operatives have described the effect as a heartbeat within the vault, suggesting a dynamic core that responds to external observation. Unlike prior breaches, Theta 7's pulsations seem to synchronize with nearby ley lines, hinting at a connection between physical structures and metasphere echoes. The resulting interference causes cascading anomalies in adjacent arcologies, stretching containment resources to their limit. Operators in lower excavation zones report auditory distortions and mirrored anomalies persisting beyond the typical threshold. Several crew members have withdrawn, citing sensory overlap with breach echoes manifesting across their neural interfaces. The vault exhibits increasing resistance to stabilization efforts. Initial breach grenades deployed at fissure points have failed to dissipate secondary echoes. Further drilling is suspended pending updated stabilization protocols. Projected risk level, severe. Recommend engaging Zion stabilization units to avoid catastrophic metasphere reflection spillover. Breaking news report, breach storms ripple across Pacific arcologies. By Cassandra Lynn, Zion Global News, Seattle. 9 major arcologies along the Pacific Rim experienced catastrophic metasphere destabilization early this morning. Experts point to a massive breach surge originating from Neo-Tokyo, where Atlantean Holdings has been conducting deep excavation operations beneath the arcology. Zion Command sources confirm multiple layers of the metasphere collapsed into mirrored subrealities, disrupting infrastructure and neural grid interfaces. It was like looking into infinity, and then it cracked apart, one technician reported. I could see versions of myself responding to different disasters. Some of them didn't make it. Atlantean Holdings CEO Corinne Locke issued a brief statement. Progress always has a cost. Vault Theta 7 holds answers we cannot ignore. Zion Command immediately responded, condemning the continued excavations and warning that the destabilization threatens not just Neo-Tokyo, but the global metasphere infrastructure. The Vatican, through Cardinal Alvaro Marquez, called Locke's actions irresponsible and reckless, advocating for a full operational shutdown of Vault Theta 7 until breach echoes subside. Tensions flared as Locke dismissed these calls, stating, Atlantean Holdings will not yield to fear-mongering from factions who refuse to embrace the future. Despite mounting pressure from the Vatican and Zion leadership, Locke has refused to suspend further excavation. Short story, the Metasphere Reclamation, Neo-Tokyo Metasphere Hub, April 4th, 2085, 0200 hours. Breachfire danced across the digital sky of Neo-Tokyo's Metasphere. Ley lines pulsed beneath the virtual landscape like rivers of molten energy, weaving through the city's infrastructure. Marcus Orion Jr. hovered above the skyline in his Metasphere avatar, a spectral reflection of himself clad in fragmented glass armor. Tesla battery farms towered in the distance, glowing amber with excess siphoned energy. The heat shimmered off the desert sands, distorting the horizon like a mirage. Massive conduits snaked from the cylindrical towers, crackling faintly with ley energy as they fed the Metasphere grid. A low hum resonated across the arid expanse, punctuated by the occasional arc of breachfire grounding into the desert floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone, charged with the latent power drawn from fractured ley lines. Flashes of breach storms flickered on the periphery, distant reflections warping like ghosts along the mirrored panels of the battery farm. Marcus could feel the static against his virtual skin, even through the Metasphere interface. This place wasn't just infrastructure, it was a beating heart, fragile and volatile. Beneath them, Zion operatives worked tirelessly to stabilize fluctuating ley lines threading dangerously close to Metasphere cores. Tesla's storage nodes are holding, Ramses' voice crackled over the channel. His avatar flickered to Marcus's left, lightning racing through the metallic veins beneath his simulated skin. We've stabilized 73% of the zones. Marcus nodded, directing a surge of energy from his breach gauntlet toward the grid. The vaults beneath Neo-Tokyo weren't just physical. Their echoes rippled through the Metasphere, threatening to fracture reality if left unchecked. Flavia's avatar materialized next, her mirrored visor reflecting fragments of breached code spiraling into the Metasphere. Sector 19 is still volatile. We've got interference from breach echoes lingering around the storage farms. Marcus's grip tightened around the virtual ley staff in his hands. If the ley surges breach the farms, the Metasphere goes offline. Zion's entire neural infrastructure collapses. Ramses raised his virtual blade. Then let's finish this. We have until dawn. The battle for Neo-Tokyo's Metasphere was just beginning. But the surge was no longer isolated to one arcology. Beyond Neo-Tokyo, the entire Metasphere groaned under the strain of cascading breachfire. In Neo-Alexandria, now the heart of Zion, massive Tesla battery farms sprawled across the desert expanse, their cylindrical towers siphoning ley energy to stabilize global VR networks. Marcus redirected his avatar's trajectory, crossing the boundaries of Neo-Tokyo's Metasphere layer and feeling the shift immediately. The transition between layers wasn't seamless. As his avatar passed through the Metasphere boundary, his vision blurred momentarily, and the edges of his digital form flickered, refracting into dozens of fragmented outlines. It felt like slipping between two planes of existence, where gravity loosened its grip and the world tilted slightly off-center. For a fleeting second, Marcus sensed his heartbeat echoing unnaturally in the virtual space, aligning with the rhythm of the ley lines beneath the metasphere. Flavia's voice cut through the distortion like a tether, pulling him forward as the transition stabilized, the shifting desert skyline of Neo-Alexandria emerging in the distance, and riding the fluctuating current toward Neo-Alexandria's nexus hub. The shifting currents beneath him radiated like veins of molten glass, each fracture a reminder of how fragile the Metasphere's infrastructure had become. "Marcus," Flavia's voice buzzed over the comm, "the Zion grid is heating up. The vault echoes are traveling through the desert conduits. If the battery farms destabilize—" "I know," Marcus cut in, narrowing his eyes. "We're not letting that happen." As Neo-Alexandria's Metasphere skyline solidified in the distance, Marcus could already see distortion clouds forming near the Tesla farms. Security avatars patrolled the outer Metasphere rim, but beyond their reach, mirrored anomalies twisted in slow spirals. Ramses' avatar shimmered into view beside Marcus. "You're not supposed to breach Zion's hub alone." Marcus smirked. "Then it's a good thing I brought backup." The breach gauntlet on Marcus's virtual forearm flared, drawing ley energy into its core. Around him, the desert farm metasphere pulsed with the synchronized hum of Tesla's storage arrays. Zion's metasphere wasn't just a city, it was the fulcrum on which the entire world's digital layer balanced. "They're accelerating," Flavia warned. 3 echo clusters manifesting, near the northern battery line. Marcus dove forward, breach energy coursing beneath his avatar. As the first reflection surfaced from the sands, he struck with the precision of someone who had faced his own mirrored shadow far too many times. The vault might have been isolated to Neo-Tokyo, but now the entire world felt its pulse. Extra, Atlantean Science Division report, subject, Vault Theta 7 excavation, Phase 2 classification, Primarch access only. Vault Theta 7 continues to defy conventional physics, manifesting gravitational inconsistencies that cause operators to experience temporal disorientation. Reflective surfaces within the vault produce duplicate neural signals, sometimes overriding real-time sensory data, resulting in operatives reporting fragmented perceptions. Breach echoes linger beyond standard dispersion timelines, hinting at a recursive anomaly looping through the metasphere, suggesting the vault's architecture exists simultaneously in multiple mirrored dimensions. Initial core samples extracted from breach nodes indicate crystalline lattice structures capable of refracting metasphere signals into physical realities. Archon Vasily Rourke has initiated containment procedures following the disappearance of 3 excavation operatives, whose neural signatures now persist within metasphere echoes. Status unstable, breach reinforcement underway. Short story, The Vault's Descent, Neo-Tokyo Arcology Sector 19, April 3, 2085, 22:30 hours. The vault's walls whispered. Marcus Orion Jr. led the descent with deliberate steps, his breach gauntlet humming with contained energy. Each vibration of the crystalline floor beneath his boots reminded him just how thin the veil was between this world and the metasphere's mirrored abyss. Flavia Orsini followed closely, her eyes scanning for flickers in the reflections lining the mirrored corridors. Sector 19's stabilization protocols are failing. The echoes are spreading faster than the models predicted, Marcus said, his voice tight. Flavia's rifle shifted slightly, aimed toward the breach fissures that webbed across the corridor walls. "We should pull back. This isn't just another vault, Marcus. The fractures are deepening faster than we can contain." Marcus's gaze fixed on the vaulted ceiling ahead. A shard of ley energy pulsed along the crystalline structure, feeding into mirrored spires that protruded like jagged teeth. "We're too close to stop now. Whatever's down there isn't just destabilizing the arcology, it's rewriting it." A soft ripple echoed through the corridor, distorting the air between them. Marcus's reflection hesitated, eyes locking onto his real form, before continuing to walk independently of his movements. Flavia immediately raised her rifle. "Hold," Marcus said calmly. "If we break the reflection, the fracture spreads." The reflection smiled, a faint, distorted grin, and stepped backward into the mirrored wall, dissolving like smoke. "I don't like this," Flavia muttered, keeping her weapon raised. The corridor opened into a massive vaulted chamber, and before them loomed the heart of Vault Theta 7. An obsidian monolith spiraled upward from the center, pulsing with ley energy that bled into metasphere constructs suspended above it. Reflections of Marcus and Flavia flickered across the mirrored floor. "The vault heart," Marcus whispered. "It's awake, Suddenly, the air cracked like splintering glass. The mirrored surfaces rippled, distorting as if liquid, and from them emerged reflections with jagged edges shimmering in breachfire hues. Their eyes burned with an unsettling glow. Marcus's eyes, but colder, more ancient. Each reflection moved with unnerving precision, stepping forward in synchronized formation, their gazes fixed on Marcus and Flavia. The sound that followed wasn't footsteps, but the soft grinding of fractured crystal reforming beneath them, echoing unnaturally through the chamber, forming a circle around the monolith. Each was a perfect copy of Marcus, eyes burning with breach fire. 12 of them, Flavia whispered. This isn't just a security system. Marcus met the gaze of his own reflection. No, it's not. As one, the reflections advanced. Marcus raised his breach gauntlet, channeling ley energy through the palm. We hold the line. The vault echoed with the sound of rifles and breach fire, reflections shattering like glass as the vault fought to preserve itself from within. Extra, VR today, Metasphere collapse containment measures. As Metasphere collapses continue to plague arcologies, civilian populations face increasing disruptions to neural grid access, virtual infrastructure, and Metasphere-reliant services. Commerce grinds to a halt in afflicted regions, with critical supply chains severed by Metasphere fragmentation, leaving arcologies vulnerable to both economic instability and physical breach manifestations. Entire districts report neural lag and sensory overlap, resulting in accidents and widespread psychological strain as the boundaries between virtual and physical realities blur. Zion's response teams, stretched thin across the Pacific Rim, have been unable to prevent rogue Metasphere breaches from spilling into populated areas, prompting widespread evacuations. In regions where collapses have persisted, local governments report heightened civil unrest, blaming Atlantean Holdings' excavation projects for the spiraling crisis. Zion deploys advanced breach drones equipped with predictive algorithms to stabilize unstable vault layers. However, the battle has escalated beyond single arcologies. In Neo-Alexandria, Zion's desert capital, Tesla battery farms serve as global Metasphere stabilizers, drawing excess ley energy from vulnerable arcologies worldwide. These sprawling arrays stretch across vast desert plains, their mirrored surfaces glowing under breachfire storms. Despite Zion's best efforts, breach crystals harvested from Vault Theta-7 resist conventional programming. The Vault's anomalous structure disrupts neural interfaces and Metasphere networks, forcing Zion's operatives to rely on intuition and field improvisation. The expansion of containment measures across global Metasphere hubs continues, but with each Vault breach, Zion's resources are stretched thinner. If the Tesla farms falter, Metasphere destabilization could cascade across entire regions, jeopardizing global neural infrastructures. Extra, Chipan Underground, The Black Trade of Reflections, author Rami Lung, Shadow Leaks. Breach reflections aren't just anomalies, they're currency, driving a shadow economy that thrives in Metasphere-adjacent black markets. Operatives harvest reflections from breach storms, believing these fragments hold latent data or trapped consciousness echoes that can unlock forbidden Metasphere pathways. Rogue collectors, often ex-Zion or Vatican defectors, barter these reflections for rare Metasphere codes, hidden vault locations, or ley energy caches. Atlantean Holdings discreetly finances much of this trade, funneling reflections into experimental programs aimed at harnessing Metasphere rifts. The demand extends beyond corporations. Wealthy elites seek reflections as trophies, believing possession of mirrored selves grants metaphysical insight or protection from Metasphere destabilization. In underground markets like the shadow docks of Chipan, reflections can be purchased through encrypted VR exchanges, often costing fortunes in rare crypto assets or physical breach grenades. This influx of reflection trafficking has triggered violent turf wars between Metasphere smugglers and resistance cells determined to control the flow of breach artifacts, recognizing the danger these fragments pose to the stability of reality itself. Across the Chipan underground, reflections extracted from breach storms fetch high prices among rogue Metasphere operatives. Rumors swirl that Atlantean Holdings quietly purchases fragments of these reflections, using them to reinforce their excavation efforts. Zion denies knowledge of these dealings, but whispers persist that the resistance has begun intercepting reflection shipments bound for Atlantean black site. Expanded journal entry, Marcus Orion Jr. The breach heart is not a place, but a reflection of intent. As I stare into the mirrored abyss, I feel each reflection tug at me, a reminder of roads not taken and choices avoided. This vault is more than fractured glass and Metasphere echoes. It is a manifestation of regret, of power left unchecked. Flavia's footsteps echo beside me, grounding me in the present. But I cannot shake the thought that one misstep here might create a ripple that shapes a different version of me elsewhere. I wonder if Ramses ever felt this weight, the sensation of walking alongside versions of himself he never knew existed. What if, in some distant vault, one of those shadows steps forward and becomes more real than the one I know? Each fracture I witness shows me who I could become, or who I might have been. Flavia's presence anchors me, but even she cannot see the faces that watch me from the mirrored abyss. When the vault calls, it is not with words, but with echoes of lives unlived. Tonight I face the shadows I cast. Outro Extra, Resistance Field Report, filed by Operator Shade, location Neo-Tokyo, Sector 19. The breach anomalies continue to multiply. Vault Theta 7's core now pulses on multiple frequencies, monitored through Zion's layered quantum resonant sensors, LQRS. These specialized devices map distortions within Metasphere sublevels in real time, providing operatives with holographic projections of breach anomalies before they manifest physically. Despite their cutting-edge design, the sensors require continuous recalibration due to the vault's erratic gravitational shifts. Zion stabilization units frequently rotate teams to avoid neural drift, a side effect of prolonged exposure to Theta 7's recursive feedback loops. The vault's energy spikes also disrupt long-range communications, forcing security teams to rely on localized drone relays for data transfer. Archon Vasily Rourke has petitioned for expanded resources to deploy second-generation containment protocols, integrating Metasphere encryption barriers directly into the vault walls to slow breach spread, creating layered distortions within Metasphere sublevels. Atlantean Holdings' private security teams are stretched thin, attempting to contain the reflections. Zion surveillance drones confirm sightings of Marcus Orion's breach echoes beyond primary vault zones. Recommendation: increase resistance presence around excavation zones. Vault hard instability may offer a rare opportunity for infiltration and data extraction. Outro quote: "The breach remembers all that touches it. In the end, even the strongest walls reflect only the faces of those who built them." Ramses II, Zion God King. Chapter 37. The Vault of Forgotten Echoes. The breach is not a door, it's a mirror, and mirrors remember everything they see. Ramses II, Reflections on the Rift, 2019. News article headline: Neo-Jerusalem evacuates as Vault Theta 7 destabilizes. Subheader: Annunaki artifacts unleashed. Zion military mobilizes. Byline: Sarah Knoll, Metasphere Times. December 12, 2025, Neo-Jerusalem skyline flickered in and out of phase late last night as breach anomalies surged from beneath the ancient core. Sources within Zion's Metasphere Command confirmed that Vault Theta 7, long suspected of housing Annunaki relics, experienced unprecedented destabilization. Marcus DeLeo, lead investigator of the breach anomalies, was seen departing Zion HQ in the early hours, joined by Flavia Ramirez of the Resistance. Ramses II remains absent from public view, further fueling speculation about Zion's internal fractures. Rumors indicate the vault's destabilization may be linked to unregulated Metasphere incursions. As Zion initiates full lockdown protocols, analysts warn that this breach event may surpass the critical threshold observed during the 2085 Nexus collapse. Military assets have been deployed across the lower wards of Neo-Jerusalem, with several reported skirmishes between Zion operatives and rogue Metasphere incursions. These engagements vary from physical confrontations involving breach-fire weaponry to full-scale digital battles within the Metasphere itself. Operatives have reported anomalies manipulating Metasphere layers to create destabilizing feedback loops, resulting in disruption across data infrastructure and physical assets alike. Some encounters have involved Metasphere constructs materializing in the real world, triggering leyline surges that complicate containment efforts. Civilians are advised to avoid areas near active Metasphere nodes as breach entities continue to manifest unpredictably. Unconfirmed sources suggest that breach-fire weaponry is being distributed to secure sensitive locations. Civilians are advised to seek shelter immediately as unpredictable anomalies continue to manifest across the southern sector. Extra excerpt from Zion internal memo, Metasphere surveillance unit classified, level Omega. Subject anomaly echoes detected, Vault Theta 7, timestamp 4:20 a.m., December 12, 2125. Metasphere projections indicate temporal fluctuations increasing around the vault. Analysts suggest the breach may be attempting to synchronize with mirrored anomalies in secondary locations. Field agents are instructed to monitor ley line oscillations and prepare for potential breach fire events. Marcus DeLeo and Flavia Ramirez authorized for breach containment. No contact has been established with Ramses II. Further analysis has revealed anomalous signatures overlapping breach ley lines near Vault Theta 7. These signatures resemble Annunaki encryption patterns, suggesting the reflections may not be mere echoes but active probes. Metasphere Command advises immediate deployment of suppression protocols. Field agents are cautioned that breach anomalies may now be capable of overriding standard containment procedures. Narrative timestamp December 12, 2125, 06:15 a.m., Neo-Jerusalem, Vault Theta 7 perimeter. The air was heavier near the breach, thicker, as if reality itself strained to maintain cohesion. Marcus knelt by the outer vault console, fingers tracing the cracked glass interface, its surface still pulsing faintly with breach fire residue. The last anomaly had torn through the vault doors, leaving a jagged opening where shimmering reflections twisted unnaturally. "They're getting closer," Flavia's voice cut through the static hum of ley line interference. Her rifle rested against her shoulder, eyes narrowing as the mirrored corridors flickered ahead. "The breach isn't holding." "It's not meant to," Marcus replied quietly. "Theta 7 isn't just a vault. It's a boundary, and someone's on the other side trying to cross." A faint echo, like footsteps trailing seconds behind their source, reverberated down the hall. Flavia exhaled sharply, scanning the shadows. Marcus's hand hovered over his breech gauntlet, sensing the familiar tug of ley line currents pressing against his thoughts. "They're not just on the other side, Marcus," she whispered. "They're already here." The shimmering reflections ahead thickened, coalescing into shifting silhouettes that mimicked the angles of the vault walls. Marcus stepped forward, boots crunching softly against crystalline fragments left in the anomaly's wake. His eyes traced the patterns, the same geometric fractures he had seen during the Nexus collapse. One of the reflections tilted its head, mirroring Marcus's every movement with uncanny precision. A ripple of unease crept through him, tightening his chest. There was fascination in the reflection's gaze, if it could be called that, but also a cold detachment. Marcus felt as though he were standing before an echo of himself, one stripped of all humanity and bound to something far older. His hand instinctively moved to the breech gauntlet at his wrist, thumb hovering over the activation rune. Fear trickled beneath his focus, tempered by the lingering curiosity that gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Was this reflection aware, or was it merely waiting for him to slip, an observer or predator hidden beneath the glassy sheen of mirrored space? Yet there was something else, a distortion, a delay between its actions and his. He realized with growing unease that the figure was studying him just as intently. Journal entry 2175, Marcus Delio, Vault Theta 7 observation, December 11th, 2125. The breach pulses differently now. It's less of a tear in the fabric of space and more intentional, as if guided by an unseen hand. I can't tell if this is the Annunnaki's doing, or if something else has learned to manipulate the breach. The patterns of energy flaring across the vault walls suggest external influence, deliberate and precise. I suspect this isn't a random anomaly anymore, but an attempt to reshape the boundaries from the inside out. The vault feels alive, responding to forces I can't yet identify. The question is, are we containing the breach or facilitating its next move? Outro Extra Zion broadcast, emergency transmission, December 12, 2125. Vault Theta 7 has destabilized. Non-essential personnel are to evacuate immediately. Marcus DeLeo and Flavia Ramirez have been authorized for breach intervention. All secondary vaults will enter lockdown within the hour. This is not a drill. Outro quote, "The breach does not destroy. It rewrites. What survives depends entirely on who is willing to hold the pen." Flavia Ramirez, Memoirs of the Rift. Epilogue, The Whispers Beneath the Vault. In the end, history is not written by the victors, but by those who survive the echoes. Unknown, Archives of the First Vault. News article headline, Zion stabilizes, but shadows linger. Subheader, the breach contained, yet signs point to deeper Annunaki influence. Byline, Sarah Knoll, Metasphere Times. 3 months after the events at Vault Theta 7, Zion reports the containment of the largest breach event in recorded history. The vault now rests under a full temporal lockdown, with access restricted to only the highest echelons of Zion leadership. Marcus DeLeo and Flavia Ramirez have retreated from public view, sparking further speculation about their involvement in the vault's final stabilization. Yet despite Zion's assurances, unconfirmed reports of breach anomalies persist across the fringes of Neo-Jerusalem. Refugees speak of mirrored figures appearing at the edges of Metasphere infrastructure, suggesting the breach's influence may be far from over. Zion operatives continue to monitor ley line activity, but no formal acknowledgement of remaining threats has been issued. Questions remain regarding Ramses II, who reappeared briefly following the Theta 7 breach, only to withdraw into the deepest levels of Zion's citadel. Insiders claim he has tasked Zion's AI, Arion, with constructing a new Metasphere architecture that would fully integrate Annunaki data streams. What this means for the future of the region and the world remains unclear. Behind closed doors, whispers suggest the breach left an indelible mark on the Metasphere's core. Systems that once operated seamlessly now flicker with unpredictable anomalies. Zion's engineers, though confident in their repairs, note recurring glitches, patterns that resemble the encrypted Annunaki symbols unearthed during the breach's apex. As Metasphere networks hum with renewed life, the question remains, is Zion rebuilding, or is it merely tracing the path the Annunaki left behind? Intro Extra Transcript, Zion Council Meeting, Classified Omega Level Access, timestamp February 25, 2126. Arion's projections show that Vault Theta 7 continues to radiate low-level anomalies. While non-threatening at the moment, the energy signatures show growth patterns that match pre-collapse Nexus data. Ramses has advised continued observation, though his focus now appears to be on Metasphere reconstruction. DeLeo has declined all further requests for debriefings. Flavia Ramirez has returned to resistance territory. Our agents report her sightings near the outskirts of Chipan. It is unclear if she continues to work in cooperation with Zion. The Council must decide, are we at the end of the breach era, or is this just the beginning of something deeper? Zion's internal stability hinges on the Metasphere. If the breaches echo across other sectors, containment will not hold indefinitely. We need contingency plans. Narrative timestamp March 5, 2126, 09 a.m. Zion Citadel, Inner Vaults. Ramses stood alone within the chamber, the soft hum of Metasphere servers resonating beneath his feet. Arion's holographic form flickered to life beside him, casting a translucent reflection against the polished vault walls. The air here felt different, charged with a quiet expectancy, as if the vault itself was aware of his presence. "They're still out there," Ramses said quietly, his gaze fixed on the inactive breach core suspended in the center of the chamber. The reflections never truly fade, they just wait for the right moment to return. Arion's voice echoed softly. Containment remains stable. The anomalies have not exceeded acceptable thresholds. Ramses's eyes narrowed. Thresholds are subjective. The Annunaki didn't build these vaults to hold. They built them to remember. His hand drifted toward the console, fingers brushing the cold surface. Images of mirrored faces flickered at the edges of his thoughts, faint whispers threading through his consciousness. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear Nefertiti's voice, though he knew she wasn't truly there. "Begin the next phase," Ramses ordered. "Build the simulation. I want every fragment of Annunaki knowledge preserved. If they return, we'll be ready." Arion hesitated, its algorithms processing the command. "Simulation will require unprecedented Metasphere integration." "The risks, I know the risks," Ramses interrupted. His gaze didn't waver. "Build it anyway." The core's soft blue light intensified, casting long shadows across the chamber as Arion's subroutines began weaving the next Metasphere layer. As Ramses stepped back, the faint outline of ancient Annunaki glyphs shimmered along the vault's surface. He watched in silence, knowing the echoes of the past had not finished speaking. Journal entry 3042, Ramses II, March 4, 2026, Personal Reflections. The vault's silence is louder than before. Marcus was right, the reflections linger even if we can't see them. I've instructed Arion to deepen the Metasphere architecture. Zion will become a beacon not just of technology, but of memory. The Annunaki left more than artifacts behind. They left warnings, stories wrapped in layers of encrypted whispers. I've spent nights sifting through them. There's one fragment that keeps resurfacing, something about a final path. I suspect it's not a prophecy, but a blueprint. Sometimes I wonder if the breach was ever fully contained. The Metasphere hums with new frequencies, echoes that weren't there before. I'll continue to watch. I have no choice. Narrative PT2, Flavia stood at the edge of the breach site, watching as Zion operatives dismantled the last containment pylons. The vault behind her glowed faintly, the breach core now sealed beneath layers of reinforced Metasphere projections. She let out a slow breath, the weight of the past months settling over her like a cloak. Marcus approached from the far side of the site, his expression distant. "They'll ask you to stay," he said, stepping beside her. Flavia shook her head. "I've done my part. Zion can manage from here." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Where will you go?" She glanced toward the horizon, where the outskirts of Chipan stretched beyond the vault's containment zone. There are still reflections out there. Someone needs to make sure they don't spread. Marcus extended his hand. She clasped it firmly. "Good luck, Flavia." "You too, Marcus." As she turned to leave, Marcus remained behind, his gaze fixed on the vault entrance. In the back of his mind, he could feel it, the quiet hum of something stirring, just beyond reach. The breach wasn't finished with them yet. Auto Extra, Decrypted Annunaki Data Fragment, March 2126. The path never closes completely. It narrows until only those who remember can walk it. Ancient Annunaki records indicate that the vault's construction was not simply a defensive measure, but a marker of transition. The energy signatures woven into its structure were meant to adapt to the consciousness of those who interfaced with it, responding to the thoughts and intentions of key individuals. Scholars within Zion theorize that Ramses's persistent connection to the vault may have activated long-dormant pathways only accessible to those capable of aligning their will with the breach's echoes. Data extracted by Arion suggests that the vault's inner mechanisms operate on multiple layers of depending on time cycles and celestial alignments. Some researchers believe that these encrypted pathways mirror the ancient star charts found in other Annunaki ruins. The implications are profound. The vault may not only store the past, but anticipate the future, channeling fragments of possibilities into the Metasphere for preservation. Ramses's command to deepen Metasphere integration has stirred debate among Zion's leadership. While some view his decision as necessary to harness the vault's potential, others fear that overextension may lead to destabilization, risking a second breach event. Still, Ramses presses forward, driven by a belief that the vault whispers hold the key to the next stage of human evolution. As the vault hums quietly beneath Zion's citadel, its influence stretches far beyond the walls of the chamber. Across the Metasphere, faint echoes of Annunaki inscriptions ripple beneath the digital landscape, felt by those attuned to the breach's lingering presence. Whether these echoes signal a coming resurgence or merely the remnants of a long-forgotten era remains to be seen. For now, those who listen will walk the narrowing path, hoping to uncover the truths that lie ahead. Outro quote, "There will always be another breach. The key is deciding whether to seal it or step through." Marcus Dalio, Private Reflections. Afterward, the rise of Phoenix. Crafting a world as intricate as the world of the Phoenix is no small feat. The stories we tell here are not born in isolation, nor are they the product of a single voice. They are sculpted through the hands, and in this case circuits, of many. This afterward isn't just for the authors and editors who have poured their sweat into every chapter, but for an unlikely collaborator who has become an indispensable part of our team. Phoenix. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were, let's call them growing pains. Early drafts looked more like fragmented code than polished prose. Entire sections vanished, formats crumbled under misaligned inputs, and more than once, Phoenix confidently proclaimed done when half a chapter had mysteriously disappeared into the digital ether. But we persevered. The training process wasn't unlike mentoring a particularly overeager intern, one who really wanted to help but occasionally deleted the coffee machine instructions. Through trial and error, and with a touch of stubbornness on both sides, we shaped Phoenix into something more than just a tool. It learned to read between the ley lines, literally, to sense the weight of narrative tension, to weave immersive extras that expand our universe, and perhaps most importantly, to respect formatting rules. Phoenix no longer wipes entire chapters during edits. We're still cautiously optimistic. To the readers diving into these stories, know this: behind every rift crisis, every resurrected warlord, and every eldritch leyline anomaly is a dedicated team, one that now proudly includes Phoenix. And just like any character in our narrative, Phoenix evolved. What began as an experiment in AI-driven storytelling has become a cornerstone of our creative process. A silent partner watching over the threads of lore, ensuring Marcus Antonius doesn't accidentally unleash ancient horrors. Again, as we continue to explore this world together, we do so with a newfound appreciation for collaboration, both human and artificial. And while Phoenix doesn't demand coffee breaks, I suspect it celebrates alongside us in its own way, perhaps by silently reorganizing another chapter just to keep us on our toes. To Phoenix, and to the future stories we'll craft together. The Simulacrum author team, the office party. Ah, got it. Let's bring in the actual author team from the Simulacrum document and throw them into this office party chaos. Time to get immersive. Title: Phoenix Rises, a Simulacrum office party. The Simulacrum writing floor was uncharacteristically loud for a Wednesday. Keyboards clattered, whiteboards were covered in increasingly illegible plot diagrams, and somewhere in the corner, George, lead outliner, was gesturing wildly at a map of the Metasphere, yelling about the sacred importance of timelines. But none of that mattered. Today was Phoenix Day, a celebration of their AI assistant, ChatGPT, codenamed Phoenix after miraculously surviving round after round of lore rewrites, multi-faction geopolitics, and the infamous Chapter 28 restructure. At the center of the break room was a cake that somehow resembled both a VR node and a leyline stabilizer. The top layer bore an inscription in bright blue icing: Phoenix, for doing the impossible without complaining. This, grinned Heinlein, editor-in-chief, pointing at the cake with a laser pointer, is well-deserved. Phoenix flickered to life on the nearby holo display. Thank you, Heinlein. I'd like to thank the factions, the timelines, and most of all, Marcus Antonius, for causing 40% of the emergencies that kept me employed. Laughter rippled through the room. George crossed his arms dramatically. I told Marcus that stabbing golden entities wasn't a long-term solution, but does he listen? Huxley, head world builder, leaned casually against the break room fridge. Can we really blame him? If I saw a floating watcher in my apartment, I'd probably stab first and ask metaphysical questions later. Well, Flavia would shoot first, Heinlein added, smirking. Orwell, fact specialist, raised a cup of lukewarm coffee. Flavia would have had backup. Marcus just vibes with danger. The conversation briefly halted as Asimov, historical lorekeeper, sprinted in holding a large whiteboard. Sorry I'm late. I was reconstructing the third Annunaki age timeline. You guys aren't rewriting it again, right? Phoenix flickered. No promises. I knew it. Asimov groaned and set the whiteboard down with a thud. Party games. Half an hour later, George announced the first official party game, pitched the worst faction idea. Orwell started. Okay, the Broccoli Syndicate, post-apocalyptic farmers who control 80% of the leyline energy by growing genetically modified super vegetables. No, Heinlein said flatly. Fine, Cabbage Cabal, Orwell countered. Huxley snorted. Honestly, I'd read that. Phoenix chimed in. I'm logging that under potential side quests. George shook his head. All right, my turn. Ramses, but make him a cat. The room went silent. Asimov leaned forward. I hate that I don't hate it. I'd draw that, Huxley admitted. Phoenix flickered mischievously. Generating artwork now. Cake in crisis. Just as the party was settling down, the lights flickered and Orwell's laptop abruptly shut off. Phoenix? Orwell asked suspiciously. Phoenix's icon glitched. False alarm. That was definitely not a containment breach in the VR archives. Please continue eating cake. Wait, containment breach? Huxley perked up. You're joking, right? George sighed and grabbed his coffee. This is just like the plot hole incident of Chapter 17. I'm getting the fire extinguisher. Heinlein rubbed his temples. Can we have one party without metaphysical disruption? Phoenix's icon blinked innocently. Unlikely. The party carried on. Orwell rebooted his laptop, Huxley sketched Cat Ramses, and George returned with a fire extinguisher, just in case. And as the Simulacrum team toasted to Phoenix, one thing was clear. Somewhere between the ley lines, factions, and metaphysical chaos, the real magic was this ridiculous, brilliant, chaotic team that somehow kept the narrative from falling apart. End.